A terrified young girl named Leslie is dragged toward a mysterious building, desperately crying out to her family for help. Her cold-blooded parents and golden child sister just watch, with her father impatiently ordering the thugs to throw her in. Leslie scratches at the stone floor, fighting for her life. Tears stream down her face as she begs them to spare her. The guards snatch her up like a rag doll. Her own father steps up and ruthlessly shoves her toward the ominous doors. He brutally declares that her only destiny is to die in her sister's place. Leslie plummets into a terrifying abyss of dark fire, thinking this is the end. But suddenly, glowing blue hands emerge from the smoke, shielding her and whispering for her to escape. As she falls, traumatic memories flood her mind, like her father starving her just for talking back. She remembers her mother viciously scolding her over a minor tutoring mistake. Her mother constantly reminded her that her only purpose was to support her older sister. She recalls a time her sister Eli falsely accused her of messing up a translation. Eli violently grabbed her by the hair. She used the flimsy excuse to punish Leslie out of pure spite. Leslie realizes she was never treated as a human, just a disposable tool. Her family only forced her to look beautiful for this exact day of sacrifice. She stares blankly, realizing how incredibly naive she was to trust them. She finally accepts that hoping for their love was a massive mistake. The dark flames swallow her whole as she desperately wishes to live. Suddenly, Leslie jolts awake in her shabby attic bed. She clutches her chest, coughing and crying in absolute shock that she actually survived. Huddling in the dark, she trembles from the lingering terror. But her sadness quickly turns into cold, hard resolve. She vows to never seek her toxic family's affection again. Staring at her small hands, she wonders how she can possibly fight back. She remembers that in this empire, noble families possess unique divine powers. To her absolute shock, dark magic starts swirling around her fingertips. She connects the dots, realizing this ancient power must belong to the ghostly voices that saved her. She considers sneaking into the library to dig up some answers. But she quickly shelves that idea for later. Clenching her fists, she knows she needs serious power to survive. She thinks about the Empire's laws, realizing she's stuck in this house for 6 more years before she legally becomes an adult. If she runs away now, her psychopathic father will just drag her back and finish the job. She stands up, determined to find a foolproof escape plan. A confident, eerie smile creeps onto her face as she embraces her new reality. Later, she sneaks through the halls but suddenly hears shouting. Inside a room, her sister Eli is throwing a massive tantrum. Leslie remembers how the nobles always gossiped about them. They constantly praised Eli as the warm light while treating Leslie like the dirt beneath her shoes. She recalls her mother violently forcing her to look in the mirror. She was brainwashed into believing she was just a useless shadow. They drilled it into her head that her only job was to be Eli's stepping stone. Shaking off the trauma, Leslie promises herself she will never bow to them again. She stops dead in her tracks when she hears them mention waiting half a year. She presses her ear against the door to eavesdrop on the conversation. Inside, her father is gently comforting the spoiled golden child. Eli furiously complains that her own powers didn't fully awaken because Leslie didn't burn to a crisp. She whines that her current magic is way too weak to boost their family's status. Hiding in the shadows, Leslie realizes her father only kept her alive to act as a living battery for her sister's success. Listening through the crack in the door, Leslie hears her father coldly state that she was born strictly for Eli's benefit. He explains that Leslie's entire existence was designed for one purpose: to act as a sacrifice that transfers her magic to her golden child sister. When Eli worries about Leslie awakening her own powers, their dad completely brushes it off, claiming Leslie doesn't even have the family's signature blonde hair and green eyes. He ruthlessly adds that her white hair makes her the perfect disposable battery. He admits that if she wasn't needed for the dark ritual, he would have just made her a lowly maid. Leslie is completely shattered as she realizes her entire life, birth, and death were just stepping stones for Eli. The horrific truth sets in no matter what she did or how hard she tried. They were always going to throw her into the fire. She collapses onto the cold floor, bawling her eyes out as her entire world crumbles. The next morning, a dead-eyed Leslie walks toward the exit, completely ignoring her father when he asks where she's going. Furious at being ignored, he snaps and calls her useless trash. But this time, Leslie stops dead in her tracks and glares back. She turns around and tells the Marquis to really think about his words. With a cold smirk, she reminds him that without her being his little sacrifice, his plans would be totally wrecked. The Marquis takes a shocked step back before losing his temper, threatening to beat some sense into her. Remaining completely unfazed, Leslie stares him down and says if the sacrifice is so important for the family, he should go jump in the fire himself. She absolutely drops the mic, declaring she is done being their pawn. The Marquis lunges to grab her, but Leslie's new dark magic subtly swirls, making him suddenly groggy and weak. Leslie casually walks outside to a carriage, but the driver rudely tells her it's reserved for Eli. She tells him to take her to the temple anyway, prompting the disrespectful coachman to actually grab her arm. Leslie immediately snaps, glaring daggers at him for daring to touch a noble lady. She fiercely demands to know where he learned such garbage manners. The servants are completely shook by her sudden boss energy. They literally think they're dreaming, since she was basically a mute pushover just yesterday. She boldly scolds them for ignoring their master, causing the terrified coachman to bow and stammer. Leslie bluffs, saying she'll just drive the insanely expensive carriage herself. Panicking, the coachman finally caves and hurries to open the door as she tells him not to make her repeat herself. Inside the carriage, Leslie looks at her trembling hands, realizing she just verbally slapped the staff into submission. She clenches her fist, fully embracing her new savage mindset. She decides right then and there to stop caring about the toxic losers who tormented her. Staring out the window, she plots her next massive move. She thinks about House Salvetter, a noble family older than the Empire itself. Everyone whispers that they are a family of literal monsters. They are the strongest military force in the land, led by a fierce warrior duchess. Legend says the first Salvetter ripped a king's head off with his bare hands like a mortal combat fatality. The current Duchess is rumored to be vastly stronger than Leslie's pathetic family. People say her two sons also inherited her insane, superhuman strength. And their monstrous power just keeps growing. Leslie trembles, wondering if she can actually convince this terrifying woman to help her. But she quickly reminds herself that she's already been living with actual monsters her whole life. A warrior who rips heads off is way better than a deadbeat dad who throws his kid into an incinerator. The carriage finally arrives at the Grand Temple. The coachman respectfully extends his hand to help her step down. She tells him to wait, suddenly feeling super awkward because she doesn't actually know high society manners. She realizes she needs to start acting like a true noble instead of a glorified maid. Suddenly, she stops in her tracks when she hears some gossiping noblewomen mention Duchess Salvetter. The women chat about how the Duchess surprisingly didn't show up to Digi Island today. They sigh, disappointed that they missed their chance to greet the legendary warrior. Leslie listens closely, knowing the Duchess notoriously rejects all guests, making this missed meeting a huge opportunity for her master plan. Leslie calculates that she has plenty of time before Digi Island opens again, especially since the next sacrifice isn't for half a year. She steps confidently through the temple halls, knowing she's safe for now. But she actually came to the temple for a completely different mission. She walks up to a priest and politely asks to see the Sperato family record book. She knows the Grand Temple archives every noble family's entire history. This specific tome holds a detailed record of every single death in her twisted bloodline. She is absolutely convinced the dark truth about the sacrifices is hiding in those pages. She stares down the priest, dead set on getting her answers. The massive, ancient book contains generations of buried secrets. She knows this ledger will prove exactly why her toxic family tried to toast her. The priest seems hesitant, double-checking if she really means the highly classified family book. He politely asks if she has any proof that she's actually a member of the noble house. Without an ID, temple rules state she can't peek at the documents. Leslie freezes, realizing she doesn't have her family crest since she was basically locked in an attic her whole life. Thinking fast, she points out that she arrived in the ultra-expensive Sperato carriage. The priest instantly buys it, realizing only a true daughter of the house could ride in a VIP whip like that. He mentions he heard she was too sick to go out, making Leslie realize her parents covered up her murder attempt with a cheap fake illness excuse. He unlocks the massive archive room, explaining the newer records are in the common language. He offers to translate the older books written in the ancient language of Gore, but Leslie casually says she can read it herself. The priest's jaw drops, super impressed that a kid knows a complex language usually taught at elite academies. Leslie blushes super hard, completely caught off guard since this is literally the first time anyone has ever complimented her. She remembers she only knows this stuff because she had to study while Eli was busy playing princess, and the priest smiles, leaving her to read. Alone at last, Leslie dives deep into the ancient texts to research the last dark magic user from over a century ago. She finds tons of sketchy records of kids dying from sudden accidents like drowning and falling. She quickly connects the dots, every single one of them died before adulthood. Her eyes widen in horror as she realizes they all had older siblings. One kid was literally buried the exact same day they died, which is insanely suspicious even for commoners. The sickening truth hits her. She was born into a system totally rigged against the second child. Every lesser sibling was doomed to be thrown into the fire just to power up the main heir. Tears stream down her face as she remembers the ghostly voices in the flames begging her to run. She realizes those weren't just random ghosts, they were the trapped souls of all the sacrificed kids. They had shielded her, desperately wanting at least one child to finally survive the twisted ritual. Sobbing, she understands the real source of her massive magical powers. Standing in the dark library, she feels the crushing weight of their centuries-old sorrow. Her dark magic is literally fueled by 1,000 years of pure hatred from murdered children. Wiping her tears, she fiercely promises to avenge every single one of them. She vows to completely obliterate the Sperado family and burn their legacy to the ground. Filled with adrenaline, she dashes out, deciding she can't wait. She has to beg the legendary Duchess Salvator for help today. But in her rush, she trips, only to be smoothly caught by a handsome young man. He flashes a warm smile, genuinely relieved that she isn't hurt. Leslie quickly dusts herself off and nervously thanks the stranger for his kindness. He hands her a dropped handkerchief, acting like a total gentleman. He gently warns her that the temple floors are super slippery. Suddenly, someone violently grabs Leslie's hand, aggressively shouting her name. The grip is tight and completely unhinged. It's her sociopathic sister, Eli, putting on a cringeworthy act and suffocating her in a fake, loving hug. Leslie is totally grossed out and confused by the sudden affection. But then she glances over and spots the prince of the Orlando Empire standing right there. It immediately clicks. Eli is only acting like a sweet big sister to score cheap brownie points with the royal. As Eli dramatically fake cries about being so worried, Leslie glares right through her totally bogus performance. Totally disgusted, Leslie violently shoves her sister away. Eli stammers, shooting a panicked glance at the prince to see if he noticed. Switching to victim mode, Eli fakes crying and guilt trips Leslie about how worried she was. She puts on an absolute Oscar-worthy performance, wailing about her broken heart. The guards look on in shock as Eli drops to her knees in front of the carriage. Internally, Eli seethes, annoyed that Leslie is acting so arrogant with royalty watching. But Leslie sees right through the BS, knowing this is all a calculated act. Eli figures this little stunt will make the crowd turn on Leslie instead. Looking at her fake sister, Leslie remembers being starved by her parents as a cruel punishment. Even the servants used to mock her while denying her food. She realizes that everyone in this twisted household is exactly the same flavor of trash. From the marquis down to the maids, they are all monsters. Vowing to never be a victim again, Leslie suddenly leans in and calls out Eli's bluff. Eli quickly wraps her in another fake hug for the cameras, pretending to be a sweet big sister. But while hugging, Leslie whispers a savage threat, telling Eli to shut her mouth before the prince finds out she threw her in a fire. Eli is completely shook, stunned by the sudden disrespect. She wonders how the quiet little Leslie suddenly sounds exactly like their ruthless father. Leslie's eyes glow with a terrifying new confidence. She unleashes a glimpse of her dark magic, creating a massive shadow aura that only Eli can see. Eli panics, realizing that if their dad finds out Leslie has powers, he'll redirect all his love and attention to her instead. Leslie shushes her, casually mentioning she doesn't want that monster's love anyway, but Eli will be in deep trouble if the secret spills. Pushed to the brink, Eli violently shoves Leslie away, accidentally doing it right in front of the prince. Leslie smoothly plays it off, revealing her burn scars and loudly claiming they are a beautiful gift from her sister. Later that day, a nasty maid named Rhea slams open Leslie's bedroom door. She aggressively rips the blanket off the exhausted girl. Rhea starts screaming at her for disrespecting Eli and almost causing a royal scandal. The maid forcefully grabs Leslie's burned arm, claiming the scars came from stupidly playing with a kettle on vacation. Leslie glares, realizing Eli actually fed the staff a pathetic lie to cover up the attempted murder. The maid continues her rant, trying to drag Leslie out of bed. She yanks her by the wrist like a rag doll. Rhea orders her to march straight to Eli and apologize for being a brat. She aggressively squeezes the fresh burns, literally trying to torture Leslie into submission. But Leslie effortlessly swats the maid's hand away with a sudden burst of superhuman strength. She stands her ground, flatly refusing to go anywhere. She declares she won't apologize because she didn't tell a single lie. Holding her scarred arm, Leslie boldly announces that Eli is the one who burned her. She quickly corrects herself, stating that the entire Sperado family actually gave her the burn. She stares daggers into the maid's soul. She absolutely doubles down on the horrific truths. With tears in her eyes, she confirms they literally threw her into a blazing fire pit. The maid gasps, completely convinced that Leslie has lost her mind. Rhea rants about how she personally raised Eli to be a perfect, patient, and respectful lady. Leslie just stares at her, completely over this crazy delusion. Furious, the maid threatens to run and tell the Marquis everything. She steps up, aggressively demanding respect from the young girl. But Leslie hits her with pure boss energy, casually telling the maid to go ahead and snitch to whoever she wants. She dismisses the servant like an absolute queen, turning around to go back to sleep. Losing her mind with rage, Rhea lunges at Leslie's back. But before she can connect, Leslie's shadow magic sweeps the maid's legs out from under her. The maid crashes hard to the floor as Leslie casually pulls the covers up, telling the trash to hurry up and take itself out. Leslie coldly commands the maid to shut up and get out of her room. Suddenly, Eli walks in and spots the bruised servant pathetically sprawled on the floor. Instead of helping, Eli viciously snaps at the maid to shut her mouth. She brutally orders the injured woman to literally crawl out into the hallway. Eli turns to Leslie, demanding a private chat, but Leslie flat out rejects her. Eli completely loses it, calling her sister an abominable freak for hiding her powers and surviving the deadly fall. She throws a massive tantrum, screaming that the dark magic rightfully belongs to her. Leslie raises an eyebrow, sarcastically asking how the power could possibly be hers. Eli narcissistically brags that she is the golden firstborn, flaunting her family's signature blonde hair and green eyes. She cruelly points out Leslie's dull gray hair, treating her like an absolute peasant. Flexing her superior beauty, Eli claims she is obviously the only one deserving of the magic. Leslie looks physically disgusted, but Eli completely misreads the room and smiles smugly. Eli orders her to lay low and quietly live like a dead rat for the next 6 months. But Leslie totally flips the script, threatening to go downstairs and snitch to their father right now. Eli freezes as Leslie coldly states that she'll just show the Marquis her newly awakened powers. Leslie hits her with a massive reality check, asking who their power-hungry dad will actually throw into the fire once he finds out. She smirks, grabbing the door handle and heavily implying that Eli might be the next human sacrifice. Sweating bullets, a terrified Eli immediately backs down and tells her to get out. Leslie flexes her dominance, promising to keep the secret only if Eli never bothers her again. Later, the maids are absolutely shocked to find Leslie casually sitting in the dining room demanding food. She straight up rejects her usual scraps, ordering them to bring her a meal fit for an actual human being. When the maid hesitates about the master's strict diet rules, Leslie casually blackmails her into fetching the good stuff. Taking a sip of her drink, Leslie enjoys the sweet taste of her very first proper meal. Suddenly, Eli and her mom walk in, dropping their jaws at the sight of Leslie feasting like a queen. They stare in utter disbelief at the mountain of empty plates in front of her. Her mom tries to aggressively scold her, but Eli frantically holds her back to prevent a scene. Eli quickly whispers that Leslie has gone completely psycho and might actually bite her. Meanwhile, a carriage arrives at a massive, intimidating estate. The terrified coachman begs Leslie to reconsider, terrified of the infamous war hero who lives there. He desperately gossips that the legendary Duchess Salvator is so monstrous, she allegedly has demon blood and scales on her face. Totally unfazed, Leslie steps out in her blue dress and tells him to wait. Standing before the massive gates, she boldly asks the guards to announce her to the Duchess. Inside the grand office, the intimidating Duchess hears the commotion and asks who is visiting. Her assistant formally announces that the youngest daughter of the Sperato family is requesting an audience. The Duchess rests her chin on her hand, looking mildly intrigued by the unexpected guest. Glancing out the window, the assistant points out that the visitor is incredibly tiny. The Duchess agrees, guessing she's barely 10 years old, which is a shock compared to her own massive, hulking children. The assistant confirms her identity, recalling the rumors of the hidden Sperato daughter who clumsily spilled tea on the prince. The Duchess remembers the shady Marquis constantly bragging about his family's future glory. He had boasted that while Eli was beautiful, she possessed a weapon far greater. The Duchess recalls his creepy evil smile as he gloated about his trump card. She correctly guesses he meant raw magical strength, knowing many nobles are secretly jealous of her own family's supreme power. Her assistant suggests just ignoring the kid until she gets cold and gives up. The Duchess quietly grabs her pen, contemplating her next move. Back outside, the shivering coachman practically begs Leslie to leave before they both get wrecked by the Duke. Leslie straight up dismisses him, telling the cowardly driver to save himself. She orders him to lie to her father, claiming she's at the temple praying to wash away her sins. The coachman doesn't hesitate, immediately speeding off like a bat out of hell to save his own skin. Left completely alone in the freezing courtyard, Leslie blows on her hands, determined to wait it out no matter what. Meanwhile, the fierce Duchess sets her pen down and finally pushes her chair back. Inside the estate, Duchess Salvator rubs her temples, completely exhausted from managing her territory. Meanwhile, Leslie stands outside the massive gates, shivering in the freezing cold. The Duchess suddenly remembers her grandfather talking about the incredibly sketchy, high death rate of the Sperado family's younger siblings. Tapping the glass, she stares at the tiny girl, wondering what could possibly make her so desperate to stand out there. Her butler enters to announce that her meal is ready. But the Duchess waves it off, deciding she wants to welcome her little guest first. She orders the staff to invite Leslie into the estate immediately. Once inside, a kind, monocle-wearing servant hands the freezing girl a hot cup of tea. She apologizes for not having hot chocolate, since no one in the military house drinks it. But she assures Leslie it's loaded with extra sugar to make up for it. Leslie gratefully warms her completely numb hands around the mug. The sweet aroma hits her, but suddenly, her freezing, trembling fingers slip, and the teacup hits the floor with a massive crash. Panic instantly takes over as she drops to the floor, profusely apologizing and frantically trying to clean it up. She cowers, fully expecting to get viciously screamed at by the adults. Instead, the servant gently stops her, reassuring her that a cheap rug and tea are easily replaced. She calmly explains that dropping things is completely normal when your hands are frozen solid. The servant fetches a warm blanket, gently draping it over Leslie while telling her to rest on the couch. Leslie is absolutely mind-blown by the softness, feeling like she's literally hugging a cloud. Suddenly, the servant bows deeply as the legendary Duchess enters the room. Leslie stares up in pure awe at the towering, badass warrior woman. She realizes this absolute unit is taller than the biggest, bulkiest knights she's ever seen. The Duchess smiles warmly, calling Leslie an adorable young lady. She jokes that the little girl has already stolen her butler's heart. The servant politely introduces herself as Jenna, the estate's head butler. Leslie internally panics, realizing she totally mistook a high-ranking butler for a random maid. But the Duchess just laughs it off, admitting a female butler is pretty rare. With her job done, Jenna gives a respectful nod. The Duchess gets straight to business, addressing the young girl. She asks Leslie why she came all the way to the infamous Monster Duchess's estate. Leslie confidently states she came to make a serious proposal. Sensing the heavy tension, Jenna immediately decides to excuse herself. She wishes them a good chat and shuts the heavy doors. Looking the giant woman dead in the eye, Leslie drops the absolute bombshell, "Please adopt me." She sits up perfectly straight, showing zero hesitation. She boldly begs the Duchess to make her the first adopted daughter of the Salvator family. The Duchess is totally caught off guard, wondering why a wealthy marquis's daughter wants to be adopted by a rival house instead of just marrying into it. She takes a slow sip of tea, closely examining Leslie's face. She recognizes that desperate, hollow look immediately. They are the exact eyes of someone backed into a corner, fighting like hell to survive. Suddenly, Leslie unleashes her dark magic, sending a terrifying wave of shadows through the estate that literally makes the maids outside drop their trays. The Duchess watches in awe, realizing the girl possesses the legendary power of a black saint. Leslie confidently promises that if she adopts her, the Duchess will have the absolute strongest saint in the empire in her arsenal. The Duchess bursts out laughing, asking how this kid knows exactly what she wants. Leslie admits she overheard her rat of a father gossiping that the Duchess was secretly searching orphanages for a little girl. The Duchess smirks, thanking Leslie for confirming they have a spy under their roof. Still, she pushes back, asking why a privileged noble kid who supposedly has never starved would want this. A horrific montage flashes through Leslie's mind, remembering how she was abused, starved, and discarded like absolute garbage. She tells the Duchess she just wants protection until she legally becomes an adult at 18. Leslie seals the deal by promising that once she's of age, she will gladly give up all inheritance and walk away with her own 2 feet. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Leslie pours her heart out, confessing she just wants a normal life where she can grow up, fall in love, and actually eat decent food. She absolutely refuses to live as a stepping stone or end up as a crispy sacrifice for her twisted family. Clenching her fists, she desperately begs the Duchess to take her in so she can finally make her own choices. The Duchess leans forward, totally reading the room, and notes there's definitely another reason behind this desperate plea. She gently asks the young girl to drop the rest of the truth. Leslie wipes her tears, her sadness instantly morphing into cold, hard resolve. She boldly declares she wants to completely crush the Sperado family into the dirt using the Salvator's absolute power. Intrigued, the Duchess tests her, asking why she didn't just run to the royal family for protection instead. Leslie smartly points out that the royals would only give her dad a slap on the wrist to keep the political balance intact. Plus, she drops a massive truth bomb, guessing the royals definitely already know about the thousand-year history of child sacrifices. If they suddenly punish the Sperados now, they just look like massive hypocrites. The Duchess is completely mind-blown by her political genius and asks her age, to which Leslie reveals she's turning 12. The Duchess thinks about her own household, which is basically packed with massive, overly serious meatheads. She figures having a soft, tiny girl around to shower with love and care would be a massive upgrade. Plus, snagging a literal dark saint is a total power move, so she definitely approves of the kid. But before sealing the deal, the Duchess asks if Leslie has heard the wild rumors about her monster blood and scaly face. When Leslie nods, the Duchess warns her that she's about to take off her mask, testing the kid's courage. She reveals a nasty, jagged scar covering her eye, explaining it's a battle wound from a brutal betrayal long before Leslie was even born. The Duchess waits, fully expecting the little girl to start screaming or faint like a total scrub. Instead, Leslie stares softly and genuinely says that it looks like it hurts. Surprised, the Duchess asks if she's scared, but Leslie shakes her head, revealing she has a matching burn scar. The Duchess touches her own face, deeply moved, and softly reassures the girl that the pain fades over time. Ready to make her final call, the Duchess dramatically prepares to give her answer. But suddenly, Leslie's stomach lets out a massive, rumbling growl. The intense atmosphere completely shatters as the Duchess bursts into laughter, realizing she forgot to feed her little guest. She warmly invites Leslie to join them for dinner. Meanwhile, the maids peek through the doors, absolutely losing it over how cute the girl is, and joking that their boss totally just kidnapped a kid. At the dinner table, Leslie literally sees stars, thinking the food tastes like absolute heaven. She happily munches away, realizing this meal totally wrecks whatever garbage her fake family fed her. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echo through the hall as a massive, intimidating knight enters the room. He stops in his tracks, completely confused to see a tiny silver-haired kid eating at their table. He looks to the Duchess for answers. With a huge, proud grin, she officially claims Leslie as her brand new daughter. Leslie lets out a loud hiccup, completely startled by the giant guy towering over her. The Duchess happily introduces the hulking knight as Leslie's new older brother. She casually tells him to introduce himself, calling him by the embarrassing nickname Bait. The serious knight sighs, internally crying because he's begged his mom a million times not to call him that. He formally introduces himself as the commander of the Lynch Knights, but his intense aura makes Leslie hiccup again in pure terror. He drops his full name, Bethrian Lehin Salvetter, looking like an absolute boss. Outside the doors, the maids nervously tremble, praying he doesn't scare the poor girl to death. They whisper that the gigantic man is definitely going to make the tiny kid burst into tears. But Leslie gracefully pinches her dress and hits him with a perfect, elegant curtsy. Bethrian completely freezes, absolutely paralyzed by how ridiculously cute she is. The Duchess sips her wine, playfully teasing her son for acting way too formal with his new little sister. She then asks Bethrian how old he thinks Leslie actually is. Bethrian stares down at the incredibly tiny, fragile girl, doing some serious mental math. He confidently guesses that she's a literal 5-year-old toddler. The maids outside facepalm while the Duchess sweat drops, thinking she looks at least 9 or 10. But Bethrian doubles down, claiming his younger brother was this tall at 4, so 5 makes perfect sense. He looks incredibly proud of his logic until Leslie awkwardly mutters that she's actually 12. Bethrian is absolutely stunned when Leslie casually drops the fact that she's actually 12 years old. The Duchess bursts into laughter, teasing her massive son for trying to compare the tiny girl to their giant super soldier family. She calls Leslie over to the table, noting that the poor girl is incredibly skinny and small for her age. Gently patting her head, the Duchess apologizes for her son being totally clueless, mentioning her other son in Tay is running late today. Bethrian awkwardly sweats, realizing he completely fumbled his first impression with his new little sister. Changing the subject, the Duchess warmly asks if the dinner was to her liking. Leslie's face lights up as she admits it was literally the best meal she's ever tasted, like eating food straight from heaven. Hiding behind the dining room doors, the estate's head chef drops to his knees in tears, finally getting some genuine praise after 16 years of cooking for the stoic Salvators. The Duchess looks out the window, wondering if Leslie's terrible father will come searching for her since it's getting so late. Leslie confidently explains she already covered her tracks by telling the coachman she was staying at the church to pray all night. Impressed by her smarts, the Duchess insists she sleep over at the estate, promising they always have a clean guest room ready. But as the Duchess gently strokes her hair, her hand brushes against Leslie's arm. Bethrian's expression darkens as they examine the massive, untreated burn scar on her skin. The Duchess's eyes soften with pity, knowing exactly how much pain the little girl has been silently enduring. She immediately promises to call in a priest to heal the nasty wound before Leslie goes to sleep. Later that night, Leslie lies in a massive, ultra-comfy bed, feeling like this is all just a wild dream. Staring up at the ceiling, she finally lets her guard down for a second. A quick flashback shows the holy priest arriving earlier to treat her arm. The healer was absolutely appalled, wondering what kind of evil human would leave a child's severe injury completely untreated. Leslie's eyes sparkled in pure amazement as the priest's glowing divine magic washed over her skin. Snapping back to the present, she lifts her hand in the dark, summoning a tiny wisp of her own magic. Rolling over into the incredibly soft blankets, she smiles, knowing her escape is totally real. She blushes, realizing the legendary Duchess actually considered her crazy proposal and called her daughter. But her survival instincts kick in, and she reminds herself not to get too comfortable since the deal isn't officially sealed yet. Her eyes sharpen with cold determination, vowing to forge her own path and never be used as a sacrifice again. She knows she has to lock in the final negotiations with the Duchess tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, down the hall, Bethrian knocks on his mother's office door. He enters the dimly lit room, needing to ask some serious questions about their tiny new guest. He questions why his mom would take in a daughter from the shady Sperado family, warning that there will definitely be massive political backlash. The Duchess calmly admits it'll be a tough fight, but guarantees the little girl's insane potential is worth the headache. Plus, she confesses she literally had no choice. Hearing a child beg for her life triggered her protective instincts. But there's an even darker reason behind her choice. A grim flashback reveals the Duchess standing in the smoldering ruins of a completely annihilated village. Her knights kneel before her, reporting that they will bury the endless piles of dead bodies scattered around the debris. The Duchess is shown cradling a small, lifeless body wrapped in cloth, her face filled with quiet devastation. She internally questions why innocent women and children are always the ones slaughtered in these senseless conflicts. The next morning, a cheerful maid opens the curtains, gently waking Leslie up. She helps Leslie get dressed and cheerfully asks which ribbon she wants to wear in her hair. Leslie is completely mesmerized by the beautiful box of colorful silk ribbons. But she's also super confused, wondering why a servant is actually asking for her opinion. The maid smiles warmly, joking that she can totally wear all of them at once if she wants. They laugh and agree to pick the one that makes her look the absolute prettiest. The maid suggests a bright blue ribbon, but Leslie points directly at the green one instead. She carefully ties the emerald silk into her silver hair. She shyly admits she picked the green one because it perfectly matches the Duchess's eye color, making the maid absolutely melt from the cuteness. Leslie heads downstairs, pushing open the heavy doors to the grand dining hall. The Duchess and Jenna warmly welcome her, asking if she slept well in her new room. Leslie does a perfect, adorable curtsy, politely thanking them for the amazing hospitality and the new ribbon. Peeking through the cracked doors, the maids literally swoon over how ridiculously cute she is. Leslie's jaw drops as she sees a massive breakfast feast, and the Duchess casually tells her to throw noble etiquette out the window and eat as much as she wants. Leslie politely thanks the head chefs for the incredible meal. The chefs literally burst into happy tears, overjoyed that someone finally appreciates their cooking. Looking around the massive dining hall, Leslie notices only the Duchess is there and asks where Sir Bethrian went. She wonders why the rest of the famous family is totally MIA. As Leslie bites into a dessert, her face lights up because it melts instantly. The Duchess internally squeals over how freaking cute she is. The Duchess gently calls Leslie's name to get her attention. She leans in, noting they have some serious business to discuss. Getting straight to the point, the Duchess says she's officially planning to adopt her. Leslie politely thanks her, but the Duchess clarifies it's a mutual transaction. Leslie completely understands the vibe. The Duchess explains that adopting a noble kid is usually a massive hassle reserved for fertility issues. Leslie fiercely replies that it's absolutely possible because she's the legendary Duchess. The Duchess smirks, totally agreeing with that boss energy. She pours some water, stating House Salvetter is one of the few families that absolutely eclipses the Sperados. But she warns Leslie that the paperwork and persuading the imperial family will take time, especially with annoying rival nobles trying to block the move. Most importantly, she legally needs the consent of Leslie's actual blood parents. Leslie clenches her dress, coldly stating she doesn't even consider those monsters her blood anymore. Trying to hide her panic, she asks how long the whole process will take. The Duchess honestly replies it'll take about a month. Leslie nervously fidgets, desperately wanting to beg the Duchess to let her stay right now. Horrific memories of her psycho sister and abusive parents flash through her mind. But she shakes her head, knowing forcing the issue now would ignite a massive turf war. She realizes a month is actually speed-running the legal system, and she doesn't want to drag her new mom down. Clenching her hands, she decides to play it smart and be patient. The Duchess asks if anyone else knows about Leslie's dark magic, and Leslie admits Eli knows. When asked if Eli will blab, Leslie confidently says no, because her selfish sister wants all their father's attention. Leslie casually adds she doesn't want the Marquis's toxic affection anyway. The Duchess warns that if her dad finds out, he'll lock her down and something even deadlier might hunt her. She cryptically mentions a massive two-headed snake. Leslie instantly pictures the royal crest, realizing the imperial family is the real threat. The Duchess warns her that this snake is incredibly greedy, and Leslie nods, totally picking up what she's putting down. Giving her two strict rules, the Duchess tells Leslie to hide her powers and avoid taking any damage at home for the next month. She promises to send her sons if Leslie discovers anything sketchy, but when Leslie asks what her role in the family will be, the Duchess hesitates, saying it's too dangerous to explain right now. She internally notes that they have a rat under their roof, making the walls literally have ears. Suddenly, Leslie's anxiety spikes, terrified of her fake family finding out she snuck out. She realizes she left a massive trail of shadow magic behind and starts panicking that she'll never escape. Tears well up in her eyes as she spirals, thinking she just totally wrecked her one chance at freedom. But the Duchess flashes a warm, reassuring smile. She completely melts Leslie's fears, confidently reminding the girl that she has her protection now. Later, Bethrian walks in sweating from training, and the Duchess notes he took way longer than usual. Bethrian complains he's just not used to dealing with tiny, fragile things, but his mom reminds him to bond with his new little sister. She playfully mentions his dad would have been thrilled since he always wanted a baby girl and even bought cute dresses for his firstborn. Bethrian awkwardly coughs since he was that firstborn, completely dodging the embarrassing childhood story. Getting back to business, Bethrian confirms the Marquis actually planted a spy in their estate to monitor their orphanage visits. The Duchess chuckles, realizing the Marquis's sneaky tactics are exactly how she found his abandoned genius daughter. Bethrian promises to completely squash the rat, and his mother trusts him to handle the trash. Back at the toxic household, Leslie opens the front door only to be cornered by Eli. When Eli demands to know where she's been, Leslie calmly lies and says she was at an overnight prayer. Eli snaps, grabbing her shoulder and screaming that she knows Leslie didn't spend the night at church. Leslie brutally snatches her arm back, telling Eli to mind her own business. Eli threatens to send someone to verify the alibi. But Leslie just internally smirks, knowing she already visited the church yesterday to completely cover her tracks. Eli furiously points at Leslie just as the Marchioness steps in to see what the ruckus is about. The mother rushes over, completely babying her golden child. She fawns over Eli, who stammers and tries to play innocent. The Marchioness catches on instantly. She shoots Leslie a dead-eyed glare, demanding to know what she did to her precious daughter. Leslie thinks bitterly about how the woman gave birth to her but treats her like absolute trash, boldly turning her back on her mother. Outraged by the disrespect, the Marchioness orders Leslie to the mirror room for punishment. Leslie gets violently shoved into a dark room and labeled a useless brat. Hitting the floor, Leslie realizes she isn't even a child to them, she's just a disposable object. Memories of her mother aggressively ripping her clothes flash through her mind. Tearing up, she declares she doesn't want to be her daughter anyway and vows to never step foot in this room again. She breaks down, wishing the darkness would just swallow this whole nightmare of a mansion. But she forces herself to hold back, knowing the Speratos deserve a punishment way worse than a quick end. Lying in bed, she replays the Duchess's command to survive and escape. She tightly grips the green ribbon the Duchess gave her. With tears streaming down her face, she vows to get absolute revenge for herself and every sacrificed kid. Meanwhile, the Marchioness is pacing in the study, ranting that Leslie has completely lost her mind. The Marquis casually sips his drink and tells her to just lock the kid up, but his wife is genuinely spooked by Leslie's new attitude. She complains that their once silent punching bag is now ordering servants around. She even mentions how Ria's tripwire mysteriously vanished into thin air. Hearing this, the Marquis freezes, repeating the word magic. He sprints to the family archives, frantically searching for answers about doomed sacrifices' awakening powers. He reviews the ancient texts about the Sperato family destiny. It states that children with golden hair and green eyes are born to stand at the top. They are the ones destined to awaken the dark magic. This is supposedly confirmed when the second and third children are born. Sitting by the fire, the Marquis starts to sweat, realizing his lifelong belief might be a total lie. Remembering how Leslie easily paralyzed him with her dark aura, he realizes her power is the real deal. A wicked plan forms in his greedy mind. He'll marry Eli off to the royal family for clout and send Leslie straight to the battlefield as a human weapon. He giggles like an absolute maniac, dreaming of the wealth and power that will make House Sperato untouchable. But first, he needs cold, hard proof that Leslie's magic awakened. He thinks back to the fire, initially brushing off her survival as pure luck. Wondering how to test her, he remembers something a servant mentioned earlier. Suddenly, he spots a mysterious book left sitting on his desk. He flips it open, annoyed that it's written in the archaic language of gore. He translates a section about golden-haired and silver-haired kids, scoffing at the old news. The text explains their sick tradition of throwing kids into the fire to transfer power. But then he hits a rare exception. If a silver-haired kid has a power level of 10 and the golden child only absorbs 8, where does the rest go? The Marquis throws his head back and unleashes a villainous cackle. With crazy eyes, he realizes the ultimate truth: the second darkness user has fully awakened. The next morning, a maid cheerfully holds up a fancy purple dress for Leslie. Another servant greets her with a massive smile, offering fresh meat for breakfast. A butler chimes in, eagerly offering snacks like she's royalty. Leslie stares at the extravagant dress, totally weirded out by the sudden VIP treatment. The maid claims it's a gift from the Marquis, but Leslie knows Eli would normally throw a massive tantrum over this. The servant waves it off, lying that Eli is just happily passing down old clothes. But Leslie remembers how Eli would literally rather destroy her dresses than share them. Done with the fake energy, Leslie shuts her down and tells the maid to leave so she can sleep. The maid panics, insisting she has to get up because the Marquis wants to eat with her. She nervously begs Leslie to call him father, promising a feast of her favorite foods, but Leslie remains completely unbothered by their desperate trap. Leslie flat out refuses to go see the Marquis, completely ignoring the maid's desperate plays. The maid plays dirty, warning that Nanny Rhea will be severely punished if Leslie doesn't show up to eat. Hiding under her covers, Leslie realizes her father has been ruthlessly strict with the staff lately. It suddenly makes perfect sense why everyone is suddenly treating her like a VIP. Deciding she needs to investigate whatever trap he's scheming, she agrees to head down. But she totally rejects the fancy purple dress, choosing to pull up in her plain sleepwear instead. Down at the dining room, Eli is throwing a fit because Leslie is sitting in her seat. Before Eli can get physical, the Marquis fiercely snaps at her for trying to pull her sister's hair. Eli is absolutely flabbergasted, wondering why her dad is suddenly mad at his golden child. She even starts crying over Leslie using her favorite plates. But the Marquis hits her with the ultimate reverse card, saying he's deeply disappointed in her behavior. He turns to Leslie with a sickeningly sweet smile, asking if his dear daughter slept well. When he asks why she isn't wearing the purple dress, Eli realizes he gave away her favorite outfit. Eli starts whining, but the Marquis aggressively barks at her to shut up. The Marchioness tries to defend her precious Eli, arguing that she has hundreds of dresses to share. The Marquis shuts his wife down too, scolding her for letting their 10-year-old child get so skinny. Standing tall, he vows that her father will protect her from now on. Leslie just stares blankly and completely shuts him down, coldly reminding him she's actually 12. She calls out his garbage acting, listing how he usually just screams, hits, and restrains her. Looking him dead in the eye, she reminds him of the brutal abuse he put her through just recently. Sweating bullets, the Marquis tries to save face, putting on an Oscar-worthy fake apology act. He claims he only mistreated her because he cares and that he truly regrets it. He begs her to forgive a father who didn't recognize her worth, asking her to stand up. Leslie stands, looking down at him with zero hesitation, and drops a massive truth bomb. With eyes full of pure venom, she tells him she will never forgive him. She walks away down the red carpet like an absolute boss while he tries to backtrack. As she leaves, she fixates on the word worth, wondering if he actually figured out her secret. She reminds herself that dark magic isn't flashy like holy power, it's incredibly discreet. As long as she keeps her fists clenched and doesn't use it, her secret is safe. But she knows someone with the exact same power could easily sense it. Suddenly, Eli ambushes her in the hallway, wildly accusing Leslie of snitching to their father. Leslie keeps her cool and flips the script, asking if Eli was the one foolish enough to spill the beans. Pushed to the edge, Eli violently shoves Leslie backwards. Leslie slides across the floor, completely unfazed by her sister's weak tantrum. Trembling with rage, Eli tries to hype herself up, muttering that they just need to not hold each other back. Meanwhile, the Marquis is throwing a full-blown man-child tantrum, smashing everything in his office. The maid cowers in fear, apologizing and crying about how much she's suffering because of Leslie. The Marquis loses it, screaming at her for failing to brainwash Leslie into liking him. Desperate, he aggressively grabs the maid, begging to know if she noticed anything unusual about the kid. The maid quickly spills the tea, remembering that Leslie was absolutely terrified of the fireplace. A deeply twisted smirk creeps across the Marquis's face as he realizes her trauma. He thinks about the giant sacrificial oven they locked her in. An evil scheme forms in his head. He wants to throw her right back into the flames. He figures if she's forced into a life or death situation, she'll have to use her powers to survive, proving her true worth. But he stresses over how to pull this off since she's been so cautious lately. Just then, a butler interrupts his villainous plotting. The butler asks about the Marchioness's upcoming prayer day at the temple, and the Marquis dismissively tells him to handle it. But wait, the word temple sparks a diabolical idea in his brain. Dropping onto his messy couch with a sinister grin, he suddenly acts like a devout family man. He declares that they all need to attend church, and they are definitely bringing Leslie along for the ride. Leslie calmly eats a sandwich, mentally preparing for the family's temple day. A maid pops in, letting her know the Marquis actually gave permission for her to ride in her own private carriage. The maid tries to hype up how much the Marquis cares, but Leslie turns away, just relieved to get out of that toxic mansion. Riding solo, she stares out the window, a bit shocked her dad actually let her travel alone. It feels super suspicious, but she leans back, enjoying the rare peace without her abusers breathing down her neck. After only a few days away, she's already missing the Duchess and wonders how she even survived 12 whole years in this hellhole. Suddenly, a mob of sketchy dudes carrying axes crowds outside her window. Meanwhile, in the main carriage, the Marquis casually announces they're skipping church and heading home. The Marchioness freaks out, demanding to know why they're ditching Leslie and who those creepy lumberjacks are. The Marquis lies smoothly, claiming they're just fire prevention and that everything he does is for the good of the Sperado family. While Eli cluelessly complains about their smelly carriage, the Marchioness realizes in pure horror what her husband is actually planning. But she quickly swallows her panic and forces a fake smile so her golden child doesn't catch on. Back in the solo carriage, Leslie bumps along, praying for this month to fly by. She smirks, thinking it's funny how everyone calls the Duchess a monster, yet here she is pouting because they aren't together. Suddenly, the carriage jerks to a dead stop, making her peek out in confusion. Knowing they're supposed to be on the temple path, she asks the driver what's going on. Absolute silence. She knocks on the wall but gets zero response from the outside. Panic creeping in, she grabs the handle but the door is completely jammed shut. Realizing she's in a trap, she decides she has to bail through the window. But before she can move, a massive wall of flames erupts right outside the carriage. She stumbles back in absolute terror as the fire rapidly eats through the wooden walls. Trapped in the blazing inferno, she hits the floor, desperately trying to figure a way out. She figures if she just channels a tiny bit of dark magic, she could easily bust the handle. But then it clicks, those sketchy guys outside were Sperado servants. The Marquis totally orchestrated this disaster to force her into revealing her powers. Choking on the thick smoke, she curses her family, wondering how much longer they plan on making her life miserable. Dizzy and crying, she asks herself when this nightmare will ever end. Falling to her knees in the intense heat, she briefly wonders if this is where she dies. But a dark, vicious resolve flashes in her eyes. Instead of giving up, she decides she'd rather let her shadows completely devour everything. She makes her choice, she's going to destroy this whole place. Suddenly, a towering figure violently kicks through the burning doorway. Coughing and teary-eyed, Leslie looks up, totally stunned to see her savior. It's Bethrian, the massive Salvator Knight commander reaches out to her like an absolute boss. He gently but firmly grabs her tiny hand to pull her to safety. The burning carriage collapses into ashes as Bethrian casually walks out with Leslie in his arms, telling his squad that the tip they got was dead on. Cut back to slightly earlier, Duchess Salvator's knights are stopped by a mysterious cloaked informant. The informant warns them that there's a carriage on fire down the temple pass. Bethrian flinches, immediately suspicious of how this random person knows their exact route. The informant breaks character, frantically begging them to hurry and save the child before she uses her powers. Realizing she knows about Leslie's top-secret magic, Bethrian and his crew immediately bolt toward the danger. As he sprints, Bethrian pieces the clues together, realizing exactly what twisted trap the Sperados set. Back in the present, Bethrian cradles the exhausted Leslie, absolutely furious that someone would do this to a small child. The shady Sperado henchmen stroll up, completely oblivious to who they're dealing with, and smugly thank them for rescuing their miss. The leader has the absolute audacity to demand Bethrian hand her over. Bethrian doesn't even hesitate, he lunges forward and throttles the thug by the throat. Gripping the guy tight, Bethrian notes that despite standing near a raging fire, the thug's body is completely cold and sweat-free. He completely calls out their lie, pointing out their clean axes and the fact that they clearly knew the carriage was going up in flames. Bethrian glares at him with pure killing intent, daring him to deny it. The terrified thug struggles and barely manages to shove Bethrian away. He scrambles back, stuttering that it was just an accident, but the Salvator knights shut him down, demanding to know why the door was barricaded and locked from the outside. Knowing they're totally busted, the thugs wildly charge with their axes, but the knights draw their swords, ready to absolutely wreck these wannabe murderers. Bethrian steps up, coolly introducing himself and the elite lynch knights of the imperial estate. He glares at the thugs, resting his hand on his sword and daring them to repeat their kidnapper insult. Realizing they are completely outmatched, the cowardly henchmen book it into the woods. Bethrian doesn't even bother chasing them, focusing solely on getting the unconscious Leslie out of danger. One of the knights notices how gently he's holding her and asks if they know each other. Bethrian doesn't hesitate for a second, bluntly stating she's his sister. Meanwhile, Leslie is trapped in a terrifying nightmare, falling back into the roaring sacrificial flames. She jolts awake in a cold sweat, wildly looking around and thinking she's still burning alive. But as her vision clears, Duchess Salvator is sitting right there, gently confirming that her son Bethrian brought her home. The Duchess hands her a glass of medicine, reassuring her that the priests already healed her minor burns. Leslie cringes at the bitter taste, but the Duchess comes in clutch, popping a sweet cookie into her mouth just like last time. Leslie weakly tries to thank Bethrian, but the Duchess tucks her in and orders her to rest. Terrified of having another nightmare, Leslie nervously brings up their adoption contract. She quietly admits she wants the Duchess to stay by her side until she falls asleep. Realizing how desperate this poor kid is for a real promise, the Duchess softens. Leslie asks if she will always protect her from the fire, and the Duchess vows to always be on her side. True to her word, she gently strokes Leslie's hair until the exhausted girl finally drifts off. Stepping outside the room, the Duchess finds Bethrian waiting and praises him for the rescue. Bethrian is absolutely disgusted, stating the Marquis has completely lost his mind for literally setting a carriage on fire. The Duchess suddenly remembers an old, dark rumor about the Sperato family's second-born children dying unusually early. Thinking about Leslie's desperate plea for help, the twisted puzzle pieces finally click into place. With a fierce glare, she decides it's time to pay the Marquis a little visit. Cut back to the Sperato mansion, where Eli is smugly standing in the hallway, proud of her evil decision. She convinces herself she did a great job getting rid of her sister. Suddenly, a panicked maid runs upstairs, screaming that a total disaster is happening below. The Marquis is throwing an absolute tantrum, practically wrecking the entire house. He violently smashes a vase against the stairs, screaming at his useless servants and demanding to know where Leslie went. A terrified servant stammers out that Bethrian Salvator and the Lynch Knights took her away. Hearing the name Salvator, Eli starts sweating bullets, realizing Leslie actually reached out to the strongest family in the Empire. She intensely glares at the floor, praying that Leslie never comes back. In her twisted mind, she just wants the problem gone forever. She thinks back to Leslie's pathetic existence as a disposable sacrifice. Convinced she's finally safe, she snaps at the maid to stop being so noisy. Eli smiles wickedly, hoping Leslie's permanent disappearance will be a win-win for everyone. But right then, a butler interrupts, telling her not to bother her raging father. He drops a massive bombshell. Duchess Salvator has officially arrived at the estate. The servants are freaking out, wondering why the very people who took Leslie are suddenly knocking on their door. Down in the drawing room, Eli steps up to formally greet the Duchess. But Eli is instantly intimidated by the Duchess's towering, boss-level presence. The Duchess looks down at her and casually asks her age. When Eli says she's 15, the Duchess hits her with a cold, intimidating smirk, calling her quite big for your age. The Marquis finally bursts in, wiping his sweat and putting on a fake smile to apologize for the wait. He immediately tries to control the narrative, acting like he's just a worried father dealing with a tragic carriage accident. The Duchess quietly sips her tea while he spits out absolute BS about his servants fleeing in fear. Setting her cup down, the Duchess cuts right through the small talk and brings up Leslie. Locking eyes with him, she coldly asks, "Is she really your daughter?" The Marquis aggressively twitches, completely thrown off, but forces a laugh and confirms she's his second child. The Duchess doesn't miss a beat, pointing out that there was no Sperato family crest on the burning carriage. Cornered, the Marquis spins another ridiculous lie, claiming Leslie is a rebellious troublemaker who stubbornly picked a random carriage. He insists the ungrateful child completely ignored their elegantly crafted family rides. The Duchess completely exposes the Marquis, pointing out that Leslie was put in the smallest, oil-soaked carriage. He flinches hard, but the Duchess smoothly changes the subject to his precious golden child, Eli. She mentions how Eli gave her a grand tour of the mansion while she was waiting. With a sharp glare, she notes that something is seriously messed up about this huge estate. She lists off the extravagant things the Marquis buys for Eli, like entire dress shops. The mansion is absolutely stacked, featuring a beautiful greenhouse and a massive library just for her. But the Duchess drops the hammer. There is absolutely nothing for Leslie. She didn't find a single piece of clothing or trace of Leslie anywhere, making it look like the house only has one daughter. Leaning in, she casually brings up an old rumor her grandfather told her about the Sperados. She notes the creepy coincidence that every second and third child of the family always dies young. The Marquis shoots up from his chair, sweating bullets and demanding to know how much she actually knows. Taking a calm sip of her tea, the Duchess smirks, admitting she was just bluffing to bait him. She admits she wasn't sure if all the dead kids shared the same silver hair. But now she knows for a fact he purposely tried to burn Leslie alive. She stands up, radiating pure boss energy, and accuses him of raising Leslie as nothing but a disposable sacrifice. The Marquis totally loses it, screaming that Leslie is his property and he can do whatever he wants to her. He threatens to march his knights to the Salvetter estate and challenge her to a duel to the death. The Duchess just smiles like a total menace, promising to break every single bone in his body with her bare hands. Towering over the pathetic man, she turns to leave, telling him she'll be counting the minutes until that duel. Panicking, the Marquis changes his tune, screaming that he'll drag her to court instead. Looking back over her shoulder, the Duchess smirks, more than ready to completely ruin him in a trial. Meanwhile, Leslie wakes up with a start back in her comfy bed at the Salvetter estate. Trembling, she breathes a sigh of relief, realizing the fire was just a nightmare and she's actually safe. Memories of Bethrian saving her and the Duchess staying by her side come flooding back. She suddenly cringes so hard, burying her face in her hands for acting like such a needy baby the night before. Suddenly, a voice asks if she's awake, making her gasp and dive under the covers. She quickly squeezes her eyes shut, pretending to be dead asleep. The door creaks open as someone steps into her room. Bethrian notes she's still resting, and Leslie instantly recognizes her giant savior's voice. But then a booming new voice points out that her little eyes are squeezed shut like she's faking it. The mysterious man suddenly starts raging about the Marquis, vowing to accidentally beat the guy to a pulp on the battlefield. Startled by the loud threat, Leslie peeks out and accidentally lets out a squeak. A massive, red-haired man with a thick beard beams a giant, blinding smile at her. Leslie shrinks back in fear, but Bethrian quickly steps in, explaining that this giant is actually his dad. Instantly deflating, the hulking man gets super depressed, worrying his face is way too scary for a little kid. He hilariously covers his face with his massive hands, asking if that helps. Trying to look smaller, he crouches under his giant fur cape, looking exactly like a sad, bulky bear. Leslie just stares blankly, totally baffled because she's never seen a grown man try so hard to please her. Getting out of bed, she gives a polite little bow and properly introduces herself, assuring him she isn't scared. The dad instantly lights up, sparkling with absolute joy, even though his energy is completely overwhelming. He drops to one knee to meet her eye level and formally introduces himself as Serene Delpa Salvetter. Flashing the warmest smile ever, he happily welcomes little Leslie to their family. Serene proudly lists his titles as the Duchess's husband and the father of Bethrian and Runti. He beams with pure dad energy, completely winning over Leslie's traumatized heart. Later at the dining table, Serene watches Leslie eat like a proud papa bear but wishes he could feed her more nutritious meat. Bethrian immediately scolds him, firmly stating that a kid who just woke up can't handle heavy, greasy food. Serene argues they ate meat when they were injured kids, but Bethrian points out that Leslie is a normal, fragile child, not a literal tank like them. Bethrian casually mentions it's wild to feed heavy food to a kid who has been completely knocked out for 4 straight days. Leslie totally short-circuits, dropping her spoon in absolute shock as she realizes how long she was asleep. Sweating, she assumes the insane Marquis must have launched a massive attack to get her back during that time, but Bethrian bluntly reveals he hasn't done a single thing. Serene casually drops a bomb, excitedly announcing that his beautiful wife absolutely massacred the Sperado thugs. Leslie just blinks, completely lost. Innocent as ever, he asks what F***Sea King massacred means, giving Bethrian an instant headache. Serene panics and tries to explain himself, but Bethrian quickly clamps a hand over his dad's mouth. He gently covers Leslie's ears, but the boy just genuinely asks if it means snapping someone's neck. Bethrian sighs and tells him to scrub those foul words from his memory right now. He explains that his dad used to be a mercenary and just has a filthy mouth, leaving Leslie wondering how this giant brute managed to marry the elegant Duchess. He asks if the Duchess actually chopped his father's head off, causing Bethrian to frantically wave his hands in denial. Deciding to set the record straight, Bethrian explains everything from the very beginning. He reveals that before the Marquis came knocking, the Duchess actually paid him a little visit first. When the Marquis finally showed up at their gate demanding his child back, he threw a massive tantrum. He even brought an entire squad of elite kidnappers with him to force the issue. The thugs got super arrogant, thinking they had the upper hand since the Duchess was home alone. But they messed with the wrong monster. Without breaking a sweat, she intercepts a heavy baton strike. She grabs the attacker like a rag doll and ruthlessly snaps his arm, casually warning the Marquis that his neck is next if he keeps acting up. Back in the present, Leslie drops his spoon in absolute shock. He can't believe the Duchess herself broke his abuser's arm. Serene laughs out loud, calling the Marquis a total idiot for underestimating his insanely strong wife. Leslie is stunned. Back at the Sperado estate, his father was a terrifying, untouchable tyrant. Bethrian aggressively shoves his loudmouth dad out the door, knowing his mother hates a rowdy house. The absolute chaos of this new family makes Leslie burst into genuine laughter. He just left a literal nightmare, but knowing his abuser got completely wrecked makes the Marquis seem like a total joke now. Bethrian calmly tells him to finish his food and medicine so he can get some proper rest. He spoon-feeds the boy, who beams at how tasty the meal is, completely ignoring Serene crying anime tears outside the window. Later, the butler escorts Leslie to his brand new room, and it is lavishly stunning. Leslie is amazed, squishing his toes into the plush carpet and wondering if this is what walking on clouds feels like. The butler and Serene literally melt on the spot, completely overwhelmed by how precious he is. Suddenly, a maid steps into the room. The butler introduces her as Maidel, the one who will be taking care of him from now on. She gives a warm bow and introduces herself, and Leslie politely asks her to take good care of him. Meanwhile, Serene helps his wife with her coat after a long day. He immediately starts gushing about how insanely cute Leslie is, complaining that he's only used to his gruff sons. He proudly states that Leslie will officially be their child soon, but the Duchess notes that the legal paperwork is going to bring some serious heat. Serene points out that the bastard Marquis is already covering his tracks and erasing all evidence of his abuse. The Duchess twirls her teacup, fully aware that the Sperado patriarch is prepping for a brutal custody trial. But she has a wild plan, casually asking her husband to petition the Emperor to send the Marquis to an active war zone for a day. Serene grins like a maniac, ready to shine up his axe and accidentally destroy the guy's nape. The Duchess smiles fondly at her unhinged husband. But then she sets her cup down and strictly warns him to watch his filthy mouth around Leslie. She still hasn't forgiven the time Bethrian dropped a massive F-bomb right in front of the royals. The next morning, the Duchess is enjoying a quiet moment in the grand dining room. Leslie walks in looking sharp in a fresh new outfit and happily greets her. He notices she looks a bit tired, but before he can dwell on it, he looks around the massive table, wondering where to sit. Bethrian guides him to a seat and Leslie politely thanks him. But the boy is so tiny he can barely see over the table, making Serene realize they desperately need to buy a custom chair. Bethrian adds that they definitely need to get his measurements for a whole new wardrobe too. As they start plotting a massive shopping spree, Leslie nervously speaks up, trying to get his new family's attention. Leslie interrupts the shopping discussion, politely insisting there's no need to buy him a custom chair. He promises to eat all his meals and grow up quickly, reasoning that buying a smaller chair would just be a total waste of money. The Duchess smiles warmly, reassuring him that his comfort is the priority and others can use the chair anyway. She taps the table, deciding to call over a maid with fabric catalogs and their top-tier furniture guy. Seizing the good mood, Leslie timidly asks if he can visit downtown, admitting he's never actually been. The Duchess immediately agrees, telling him he should definitely go sightseeing. Bethrian volunteers to take him, casually munching on meat while reminding the Duchess to send guards along. Leslie looks surprised, asking if Bethrian didn't already have plans with his night order. But Serene instantly butts in, loudly volunteering to tag along for the ultimate boys' day out. Leslie looks over at the Duchess with a slightly sad smile, realizing she probably has too much work to join them. Suddenly, the butler enters with an update. Sir Runti and Sir Conrad have returned to the estate early. Hearing the news, Bethrian spots them through the large window and casually scoops Leslie up. Leslie is amazed by the height as Bethrian points out a red-haired guy outside, introducing him as Runti, Leslie's new older brother. Bethrian also points out his brother's friend, Conrad Alp Altera, the eldest son of Duke Altera. Leslie's eyes widen as he recognizes the golden eyes from his studies. He nervously asks if Bethrian means the Duke Altera, wondering if the Salvators and Alteras are actually on bad terms. After all, his textbooks claim that both families hold massive, rivaling influence over the empire. He recalls reading that one duke fiercely supports the royal family while the other stands against them. Bethrian just smiles gently, dropping some worldly wisdom that textbooks don't always match reality. Curious, Leslie asks if it's true that the Altera family possesses strong divine powers. Bethrian nods, explaining that while it's not a unique bloodline trait like their dark magic, Conrad is actually a skilled paladin of the Tessentraha Temple. Leslie stares out the window, finding the whole paladin thing super interesting. Realizing the guests have entered the mansion, Bethrian turns away from the window to carry Leslie back to his room. But they immediately bump into Runti, who rudely points at Leslie and asks, "What's that?" Without a single second of hesitation, Bethrian delivers a devastating backhand smack straight to his brother's head. He completely checks Runti for his awful manners, while Leslie flinches from the sudden violence. Meanwhile, Leslie locks eyes with Conrad and suddenly remembers a past moment when the paladin had offered him a helping hand. As Bethrian casually holds the boy like a sack of potatoes, he asks Conrad if he's here on official temple business. Conrad respectfully confirms he has a delivery for the Duchess, then finally notices the small boy in Bethrian's arms. Giving a polite bow, Conrad introduces himself formally and asks for the boy's name. Leslie hesitates for a second, then softly replies that his name is just Leslie. He fidgets nervously, secretly ashamed that he still bears the cursed Sperato name. He truly wishes he could confidently introduce himself as Leslie Salvetter, but Conrad just smiles and calls it a beautiful name. Bethrian excuses them, hoping to cross paths at the temple someday, and casually walks off with his new little brother. Left in the dust, Runti finally recovers from the smack and frantically asks who the kid is. Still holding Leslie, Bethrian just glances back and drops the big news. He bluntly states that Leslie is their new little brother, leaving Runti absolutely floored. A bit later, Leslie sits down to a massive stack of fluffy pancakes, amazed at how pretty the food looks. He takes a bite and his eyes light up at the incredible taste. But looking down the long, empty dining table, a heavy wave of loneliness hits him. Bethrian steps in, apologizing that he couldn't get time off work on such short notice to take him downtown today. Kneeling down to eye level, Bethrian gently promises to take him out tomorrow instead. Leslie shakes off his sad thoughts, reminding himself he has no right to feel lonely. He internally reminds himself that he hasn't been officially adopted yet, and he's only here on a strict survival contract. Gripping his utensils, he firmly decides he shouldn't act like he's actually their real son. Unaware of the boy's heavy thoughts, Bethrian seals his promise with a gentle pinky swear. Leslie stares at his hand in confusion, having no idea what a pinky promise even is. Suddenly, Runti walks into the room, looming over the boy and demanding to know who he really is. Keeping his composure, he formally introduces himself as Leslie Sperato. Hearing that hated last name, Runti gasps, instantly realizing his mother is adopting this child because of that day. Runti slams his hands on the table, furiously demanding to know why a Sperato child is sitting in their dining room. But a second later, he breaks a sweat, realizing he probably yelled a little too loudly. He starts panicking internally, assuming his scary glare and loud voice are about to make the kid burst into tears. Leslie just calmly stares at him, stating that he's here because he offered the Duchess a proposal that she accepted. Runti's jaw drops, completely baffled that this tiny kid actually negotiated a high-stakes deal with his terrifying mother. He stares down at Leslie, utterly bewildered by the situation. Leslie stands his ground, formally adding that since the Duchess hasn't given him permission to share the details, all he can say is that he is to become the adopted son of the house. He politely tells Runti to ask the Duchess for more info, leaving the red-haired knight sweating bullets over how fearless this kid is. But Runti looks closer, realizing it isn't fearlessness at all. He sees the deadpan look in Leslie's eyes and realizes the boy is just completely numb to anger, oppression, and ridicule. Overwhelmed by the heavy realization, Runti dramatically collapses under the table, grabbing his head and wondering why his mother brought in a Sperato. He knows exactly how messed up and abusive the Sperato family is. Slowly, he peeks over the edge of the table to check on the boy and questions what in the world Leslie is thinking, while the kid just casually goes back to eating his pancakes like nothing happened. Later that night, the maid Madel checks in on Leslie in his room. Out of nowhere, Leslie asks her what hooking fingers actually means, leaving her completely confused. He explains that Sir Bethrian did it with him, and Madel warmly realizes it was because the knight couldn't take him downtown today. She walks over to tuck him in, explaining that it's a special gesture used when making a promise. She gently hooks her pinky with his to demonstrate how a promise is kept. Leslie blushes, finally understanding that Bethrian really meant it. He then timidly asks Madel one more question. He asks what the difference is between a contract and a pinky promise, since both keep people to their word. Madel chuckles, explaining that contracts are mostly for boring adults, while hooking fingers is what kids do. She then notices the cold wind and asks if she should close the window, warning that it might snow soon. But Leslie flinches and nervously asks if he can leave it open a bit longer. Touched, Madel smiles and offers to make him some hot chocolate. She promises to make it extra sweet with marshmallows, but notices Leslie staring blankly at her. Completely lost, he asks what hot chocolate actually is, leaving Madel absolutely stunned. She quickly recovers, excitedly explaining that it's a sweet, warm drink made from chocolate that is top tier for a chilly night. Seeing him light up, she promises to make a delicious cup before they take a walk, and Leslie happily nods. He grabs her hand and sweetly asks her to drink it with him, making the maid totally melt on the spot. Down the hall, Madel bumps into the Duchess and the butler, bowing respectfully as they ask how Leslie is doing. She hesitates for a second, catching the Duchess's attention. Madel nervously admits that the boy is a little strange. She explains that he didn't know what a pinky promise or hot chocolate was, and even the kitchen staff heard him say he'd never seen food as pretty as pancakes before. She adds that he uses insanely difficult words like contract and acts way too mature for his age. The Duchess looks down with a solemn expression, deeply aware that most kids his age aren't robbed of their childhood like he was. She quietly tells Madel that the boy has his reasons, and she orders the maid to treat him well, to which Madel deeply bows. Later, Madel returns to the room with the hot chocolate, only to let out a soft gasp. She finds Leslie already fast asleep in the chair, bundled up in a blanket next to the cold window. Smiling softly, she gently brushes the hair from his forehead. The next morning, a thick layer of snow covers the Salvator estate, and Madel gasps at the sight. She runs into Madel's room and finds him staring out the frosty window, having been awake since the crack of dawn. She frantically checks on him, worried he's freezing, but Leslie just smiles, completely hyped for the snow. He reassures her he's perfectly fine and excitedly asks her to help him dress up so he can hit downtown ASAP. Soon after, Bethrian walks out wearing a massive winter cloak, with the butler fixing his collar. He's carrying Leslie, who is completely swallowed by a giant white fur coat. Madel points out it was the smallest thing they could find, Runty's old coat from when he was 10. Leslie is absolutely shook that a 10-year-old's clothes are this massive on him. Bethrian tries to comfort him, poking his cheek and casually claiming he's just smaller because boys grow slower than girls at this age. But the butler immediately leans in and whispers that he's completely wrong, telling the knight to just shut up and smile. Clearing his throat, Bethrian promises that if Leslie eats a ton of meat like Runty did, he'll grow into a giant in no time. Still bundled up in his giant coat, Leslie looks up with wide eyes and asks if he can grow to be as tall as the Duchess. Bethrian gently pats his head, assuring the boy that he'll reach his new mother's height in no time. Inside their luxurious carriage, Leslie timidly asks his maid, Madel, if it's okay to look out the window. She happily encourages him, and Leslie admits that looking outside makes the world feel a little less suffocating. Meanwhile, in a brief flashback, another maid catches Madel holding an expensive cup of hot chocolate. She reminds Madel they can only drink it once a month, but Madel reveals she was actually preparing it for Leslie. She confesses she feels incredibly bad for the boy after everything he's been through. The other maid agrees, recalling how different he is from other stuck-up nobles, and admits she actually told the Duchess all about his struggles. Madel immediately grabs her face in pure panic, terrified that she just snitched to the scariest woman in the empire. It's a well-known fact that the Duchess absolutely despises annoying things and will get rid of anyone who disturbs her peace. But the other maid swears she's fine, revealing that the Duchess simply ordered her to take extra good care of the boy. Remembering Leslie's bright, precious smile, the two maids melt. They both vow right then and there to protect and spoil him as much as possible. Back in the present, Bethrian asks how much longer until they reach town so they can finally grab some breakfast. Madel excitedly tells Leslie that they can finally get him that cup of hot chocolate he missed out on yesterday. Bethrian completely agrees, planning a full itinerary of hot chocolate, sweets, and finally, clothes shopping. Soon the trio steps into the Periwinkle Wardrobe, a high-end boutique in the city. Bethrian wastes no time, ordering a massive haul of homeware, bonnets, and winter coats for his new little brother. He also asks for plenty of comfortable shirts and pants. The shopkeeper is a bit confused by the request for typical men's clothes given Leslie's delicate appearance, but he quickly pivots, offering their best custom outfits. He eagerly pulls out a catalog and promises to take the boy's measurements right away. Bethrian notes that the family butler specifically requested pants and shirts so Leslie could finally be comfortable. He also drops the exciting news that the Duchess herself is going to personally tutor Leslie. As they wait, Bethrian sneaks the boy a small snack, reminding him that growing strong and healthy is the top priority. Leslie tries on a stunning blue and gold winter cloak, absolutely glowing in his new fit. The shopkeeper claps his hands in delight, praising the high-quality fabric. While the adults look over the catalog, Leslie politely asks for directions to the washroom. An attendant happily points him down the halls. But suddenly, a blonde girl steps out of the shadows and aggressively grabs Leslie's arm. It's Eli, his spoiled and abusive biological sister from the Sperato family, and she demands to know what he's doing there. Without warning, she violently slams him against the wall like a ragdoll. Eli arrogantly claims this store is only for the elite, mocking Leslie for stepping foot in such an expensive place. Leslie stares at her, realizing she isn't actually mad about the store's exclusivity. She's just fuming that her favorite punching bag is breathing the same air as her. He remembers how Eli used to completely ban him from walking anywhere near her room at the Sperado estate. Seeing her shopping alone so early in the morning, Leslie puts two and two together, guessing that the Marquis is broke and struggling. He realizes she must have sneaked out at the crack of dawn just to avoid being seen by the other nobles. Eli gasps, looking completely wrecked as Leslie hits the nail right on the head. She wildly accuses him of planning this and begging the Salvators to ruin her family. Leslie just stares blankly, genuinely confused by her unhinged delusion. He thinks back to how strict their abusive father was, noting that Eli was also trapped by the family's rules. Looking her dead in the eyes, Leslie coldly states that she isn't actually worried about their parents at all. He calls her out, telling her that the only person she cares about is herself. Eli grits her teeth, completely losing her mind over being read like a book. She screams that it's his own fault for being born a useless sacrifice with cursed white hair. She yells that if he had just been born with golden hair and green eyes like her, their parents might have actually loved him. Just then, the store attendant rushes over, startling Eli into letting go of the boy's arm. Leslie brushes himself off and casually tells the attendant to ignore that thing, delivering an absolutely lethal dose of disrespect before walking away. Back in the lounge, Bethrian warmly welcomes his little brother back. The older knight stares at him for a moment, mumbling something under his breath about the Sperado Marquis from a long time ago. But before Leslie can ask, Bethrian just smiles, gently tucking a stray hair behind the boy's ear and changing the subject to their next shopping destination. After the tense confrontation, Leslie asks if he can look around the boutique, and Bethrian warmly agrees. The shop's tailor loudly slams his notebook shut, announcing he has all the measurements he needs. The shopkeeper tries to show off some beautiful lace, but Leslie is completely distracted, staring blankly at a shelf of plushies. Bethrian notices and gently tells his new little brother to pick out whatever he wants. But trauma response instantly kicks in and Leslie violently flinches, defensively claiming he was just looking. Bethrian looks a bit heartbroken, realizing the boy is too scared to ask for a simple toy. Not taking no for an answer, the massive knight lifts Leslie up to the shelf and tells him to choose. When the boy shakes his head again, Bethrian sighs, preparing to play his trump card. He declares that since Leslie won't pick one, he has zero choice but to buy every single toy in the store. He deadpans that rumors will spread if a wealthy Salvator leaves a shop empty-handed. Madel completely plays along, giggling and using reverse psychology on the poor kid. Bethrian opens his mouth to buy out the entire stock, sending Leslie into an absolute panic. Blushing hard, the boy quickly points to a black bunny plushie and timidly asks for it. Bethrian grabs the bunny, reminding Leslie to just ask whenever he wants something. He firmly tells the boy that he's not trapped in that abusive mansion anymore, so there's no need to hold back. Leslie snuggles into his new plushie as Bethrian carries him out of the store, finally feeling safe. Later, they hit up a local cafe for dessert, and Madel asks if he's enjoying the food. Leslie beams, and Bethrian happily feeds him a bite of cake. But internally, the older knight is devastated, realizing that it only took a single toy and a bit of sugar to make the boy this happy. Watching the kid chew, Bethrian wonders what kind of absolute monsters the Sperados were to traumatize a child this badly. Shaking off the gloom, Madel tells Leslie to try dunking a cookie into his hot chocolate. She places a cute little snowman cookie right into the mug. Leslie's eyes light up and he immediately calls Bethrian over to check it out. He stares at the little snowman, completely mesmerized by how pretty it is. But a second later, the cookie absolutely crumbles and sinks into the dark abyss like the Titanic. The three of them stare into the mug in stunned silence. Later that night, back at the Salvator estate, Madel tucks Leslie into bed and dramatically begs him to never tell a soul about what happened. A quick flashback reveals that Bethrian and Madel completely lost their minds at the cafe, bawling their eyes out over the sunken snowman while Leslie just sweat-dropped. Madel makes him pinky promise to keep her embarrassing breakdown a secret, then tells him to get some rest. She warns him not to open the window so he doesn't catch a cold, and Leslie agrees. As she leaves, the boy calls out, softly thanking her for such an amazing day. Madel hits him with a warm smile and wishes him a good night. Left alone in the dark, Leslie feels a wave of gratitude, amazed that they treat him so well despite his dark powers. The next morning, Leslie steps out of his room rocking a fresh new outfit. Bethrian is already waiting in the hall, hitting him with a super enthusiastic good morning. Down at the breakfast table, the Duchess instructs Runti to take Leslie to the library so he can start studying. Serene asks if the boy wants more food, but the Duchess quickly shoots her husband down, reminding him that Leslie is way smaller than their giant sons. Maidel chimes in that overeating will just give him a stomachache, but then the head maid Jenna steps up, declaring it's time for dessert. Leslie hesitates, but Maidel gently nudges him forward. Jenna sets down a mug, and Leslie nervously predicts that the cookie is just going to sink again. He glares intensely at the cup, fully expecting another tragedy while the maids just smirk knowingly. Suddenly, Leslie gasps and calls out for Bethrian. This time, the kitchen staff engineered a little cookie boat for the snowman, and it actually stays afloat. Bethrian gently rubs the boy's head, praising the super cute dessert. Jenna notes that it looks like the snowman is riding over the snow, and Leslie happily agrees. Maidel claps in amazement, but little does Leslie know this took some serious trial and error. A flashback shows the kitchen staff sweating bullets as they carefully lowered attempt number 64 into a mug. They counted the seconds in pure agony as the cookie wobbled in the hot liquid. And when it finally crumbled at 35 seconds, the whole kitchen erupted into wild cheers for beating their previous survival record. Back in the kitchen, the head chef proudly raises his fist, celebrating that Leslie will have plenty of time to show off his perfectly placed dessert. The maids clap wildly, with one admitting she had to chug 20 cups of hot chocolate to perfect the recipe. The kitchen staff feels like they've inhaled a year's worth of sugar, but they agree it was absolutely worth it just to see the boys smile. At the breakfast table, Saren is clapping like an absolute maniac, hyping up his new son while the Duchess smiles warmly. Holding his mug high like a shiny trophy, Leslie beams with pure joy over his floating cookie. The entire room erupts into cheers, praising the boy like he just cured a disease. Meanwhile, Runti watches from the sidelines, looking utterly weirded out and thinking his entire family has completely lost their minds. Leslie blushes and shrinks down a bit, feeling a little embarrassed for getting so hyped over a cookie, though he loves the cheerful vibe. Later that day in the library, Runti shifts into tutor mode, ready to lay out the boys' curriculum. But before they begin, Leslie bows completely in half, politely asking his new teacher to treat him well. Runti flinches, totally caught off guard by the super formal gesture. He awkwardly tells the kid there's no need to bow that low since their mother assigned him this task anyway. Runti tells him to take a seat, explaining they'll meet 3 times a week to study archaic languages, holy texts, history, and etiquette. He pulls out a stack of books and a pair of reading glasses, claiming this is everything Leslie needs to control his crazy powers. Leslie nods obediently as Runti mentions he already knows about the dark magic. Runti sighs, pushing up his glasses as he explains that the Sperato family selfishly hid the secrets of their powers for nearly 1,000 years. Tapping a book, he figures the dark magic must work similarly to regular magic, meaning the kid has to learn ancient languages to control it. He stacks up a literal mountain of books, casually asking if Leslie has already read Rienthan's etiquette guide and Aventon's philosophy theories. Runti drops the massive stack onto the desk with a heavy thud, calling the history of the continent the absolute basics. Leaning against the desk with a cocky smile, he asks if his new student can follow along. But internally, Runti is being completely petty. He knows for a fact these books are rarely even touched by upper-level academy students. He's deliberately trying to overwhelm the kid because he still despises the Sperato family and hates that one of them infiltrated his home. Runti is genuinely frustrated that the rest of his family seemingly forgot their grudge and act like absolute fanboys around the boy. Looking at the small child, Runti vows that he won't forgive the Speratos so easily. Smirking like a true villain, he leans in and taunts Leslie, asking if the material is too hard for him. But Leslie doesn't even sweat, calmly stating that he can already decipher both archaic and holy languages. He admits he dropped Aventon's theories because they were a bit tough, but flexes that he read all of Nirokia's works and memorized continent history up to the Fourth Empire. He adds that he also finished the etiquette book, looking up nervously to see if he's lacking. Leslie tightly grips his clothes, his trauma bubbling up as he assumes he isn't smart enough. A quick flashback shows his abusive Sperato tutor ruthlessly slapping him, screaming that his ignorance brings shame to the family. The cruel tutor would strike him relentlessly, forcing the boy to study his heart out just so he could support his spoiled older sister. Snapping back to reality, Leslie reminds himself that he isn't in that cursed mansion anymore, and Runti isn't an abusive monster. Suddenly, Runti's eyes literally sparkle with disbelief at the mention of Nirokia's theories. He gets right up in Leslie's face, completely mind-blown that a 12-year-old read that incredibly niche book. Leslie stammers a quick yes, and Runti immediately demands to know his favorite paragraph. Without missing a beat, Leslie recites that God has given humans everything. He passionately adds that regardless of age, gender, or illness, all humans have the potential to be perfect. Runti absolutely loses his mind, pumping his fists and geeking out over how Nairokia is an underrated genius and the only commoner among famous philosophers. A quick flashback shows Runti's old classmates completely roasting him for liking Nairokia instead of the mainstream theorists. They mocked the philosopher, saying he was as dumb as a rock and a total laughingstock at the academy. But now, Runti grabs Leslie's hands, crying literal tears of joy because he finally found a comrade who appreciates his favorite writer. Looking at the boy, Runti realizes that knowing advanced languages and deep history at 12 years old is completely insane. He thinks to himself that with this level of knowledge, people wouldn't just call the kid smart, they'd call him a straight-up prodigy. He compares Leslie to full-grown academy graduates who barely have a moderate grasp on these ancient languages. Most Noble students are too arrogant to even finish the assigned reading, yet this boy absolutely crushed it. Hearing Runti's genuine praise, Leslie smiles softly, finally realizing he was never inadequate like his abusers claimed. Runti adjusts his glasses with a slick smirk, realizing his new student is more than ready for advanced training. He starts mentally plotting an intense one-year training arc to help the boy control his dark magic. But suddenly, Runti vigorously shakes his head like a wet dog, trying to snap out of his fanboy trance. He forcefully reminds himself that no matter how ridiculously cute and smart the kid is, he's still a Sperado, and he refuses to be won over that easily. Runti sweats bullets, fighting for his life not to fall for the boy's overwhelming cuteness. He desperately reminds himself that he's the smart one of the family and needs to stay completely objective. He thinks that if he gives in, the mighty Salvator family has officially fallen. Clearing his throat, he tests Leslie, noting that most people study Aventin's theories instead of Nairokia's. Leslie admits the book was super difficult at first, but he ended up liking it way more than the mainstream stuff. Runti immediately breaks character, excitedly agreeing with him. Realizing he's losing his composure, Runti literally rips at his own hair, battling his inner fanboy. But when Leslie points out how unfair it is that Nairokia is looked down on just for being a commoner, Runti slams the desk and completely agrees. Exhausted but totally happy, the older brother admits he's never had anyone to talk to about his favorite philosopher before. Leslie beams, politely saying he's looking forward to being taught by him. Runti shakes his little hand, warning him that he's going to be a seriously tough teacher. Reeling his professionalism back in, Runti clears his throat and suggests they move straight to practical magic. Leslie nervously asks if he means using his dark magic, while Runti digs through a box, explaining he needs to see how the power actually works. Tapping the box, Runti mentions the Duchess told him about how Leslie's dark aura swallowed the entire mansion during their first meeting. He asks the boy to unleash it again, but strictly confined to this one room. Moments later, Runti is absolutely mind-blown, clutching his head in awe at the sheer magnitude of the ancient power. Leslie points at a thoroughly shredded wooden block on the table, frantically apologizing that he only meant to devour the third one. Pushing his limits, Leslie's heart pounds as he tries to force out even more darkness. But Runti quickly covers the boy's eyes, firmly declaring that's enough practice for today. Leslie looks completely bummed, thinking he failed by only devouring 4 targets. Runti grabs the boy's scrawny arm, explaining that even fully trained magicians would struggle with that kind of output. He promises Leslie's stamina will skyrocket once he finally starts eating and sleeping properly, instantly lighting up the boy's face. Meanwhile, deep in the Salvator dungeon, a captured servant named Parlon is sweating like crazy. He confesses that he leaked the Duchess's secrets to the Sperado family, but before he can finish, he suddenly vomits black blood. An investigator holds up a bloodied tooth, wondering if a curse silenced him. The Duchess and Bethrian watch coldly from outside the cell. The investigator figures the curse triggered when he said a specific word. However, the monocle-wearing investigator quickly pivots, suggesting poison is actually the most logical explanation. She deduces it wasn't a recent poisoning, and the Duchess recalls that the spy had been throwing up almost every night. The head maid, Jenna, identifies the dead man as a mediocre servant who was hired 4 years ago. The Duchess decides it's too chilly down there and orders Jenna to summon Runti and Leslie to her office. As they head upstairs, Bethrian asks the obvious question, was the Sperado Marquis the one pulling the strings? Cut back to the library where Leslie takes a massive bite out of a sandwich. Runti absolutely panics, screaming that it's packed with meat. Leslie chokes as they realize their plates got swapped. After Leslie chugs some water, Runti smoothly transitions into a politics lesson, explaining that the royal family secretly hates the Salvators out of pure insecurity. He asks Leslie to describe the royal crest, and the boy nails it, a 2-headed snake holding the sun and the moon. Runti points to the ceiling, testing the kid on what the sun and moon represent. He explains they symbolize the sky, meaning the royal family views themselves as the absolute rulers of everything above. Runti coughs, joking that the Salvators' monstrous strength and famously rude personalities don't exactly help their reputation. He smugly adds that they actually prefer being called monsters because it keeps the paranoid royals from attacking them directly. But Leslie looks at him with wide, genuine eyes, arguing that they aren't monsters at all and have been incredibly kind to him. He pouts, feeling bad that the royals hate his new family. Runti hands him a drink, softening up and admitting it's not all bad blood. He brings up Conrad, noting that even though he's tied to the royals, they're still tight. Plus, the empire has survived 1,000 years, so they can't be at each other's throats all the time. Suddenly, a maid knocks and enters, telling Runti that the Duchess wants to see both of them. Before they head out, Runti stops and asks Leslie why he's still calling him sir. Blushing hard, Leslie nervously corrects himself, finally calling him Brother Runti. Runti smiles, fully accepting his cute new little brother. But internally, he's dead serious about the dark magic, realizing they need to prepare for the worst-case scenario if Leslie ever loses control. He decides he needs to consult their mother first and pulls open the heavy office doors. Runti steps up to the Duchess's massive desk, ready to report. Meanwhile, Leslie waits patiently in the room next door, happily sipping his drink while Madel watches over him. The Duchess casually signs some paperwork and asks how the boy is doing. Runti doesn't hesitate, straight up calling him a genius. He admits the kid's knowledge rivals Academy seniors and just needs a little fine-tuning. A flashback shows Runti investigating the library before the lesson. He reveals that in that massive, pristine library, the only book with any wear and tear was the Nairokia philosophy book. Completely flustered, Runti complains to his mother that she should have warned him they shared the exact same niche interests. The Duchess just smirks, admitting it was way more fun to keep it a secret. She smiles warmly, telling Runti she wanted him to judge and understand the boy with his own eyes. Runti covers his face, completely wrecked by her perfect logic and fully attached to his new little brother. Back in the office, the Duchess stares at the lingering dark aura, worried that Leslie's power might completely run rampant. Runti agrees, noting the boy's massive potential is currently bottlenecked by his young age. The Duchess suggests keeping Paladin Conrad close, as his divine powers act like a natural chill pill for rampaging magic. She officially puts Runti in charge of teaching the boy everything except theology and etiquette. She plans to hire a proper etiquette teacher and promises to personally train Leslie in swordsmanship, but wonders who should handle the religious studies. Later, Leslie sits with the Duchess, completely shocked to learn that his abusive father, the Marquis Sperado, is actually taking her to court. He clutches his lap in pure frustration, furious that the real abuser is the one demanding a trial. The Duchess calmly explains that from the outside, it simply looks like she violently abducted a nobleman's child. Leslie panics, vowing to take the stand as a witness and absolutely expose everything his family did to him. The Duchess takes a smooth sip of tea, agreeing that it sounds like a solid plan. But she quickly drops a reality check. The corrupt court will almost certainly side with the wealthy Marquis over a traumatized kid. She reveals the Sperados have already started a smear campaign, painting Leslie as a weak, delusional child who lives in a fantasy world. To make matters worse, imperial law dictates that every child needs a guardian. Even if the abuse is proven, the court would legally force him right back into his father's hands. She adds they might eventually assign him a new guardian, but the immediate threat is terrifying. Leslie starts shaking like a leaf, whispering that he absolutely cannot go back to that house. He knows he wouldn't survive even a few hours. His mind races, dreading the brutal revenge the Marquis would unleash on him. His entire body trembles in absolute terror just thinking about it. Suddenly, a large, warm hand gently pats his head. The Duchess reassures him, promising that he doesn't need to worry about the trial. His only job is to stay safe and grow up strong. She casually flips the script, telling him his biggest stressor right now should be picking out furniture for his new room. Leslie is stunned. She hilariously mentions that her giant husband Serene originally wanted to dedicate an entire floor of the mansion to the boy, which completely blows Leslie's mind. Chuckling at the overkill, she says they're starting with just one room and tells him to think about what kind of bed he wants and what shape of cookie he wants in his hot chocolate tomorrow. Flustered, the boy stammers that he'll just drink it plain next time. Staring at the teacup, Leslie hesitates, desperately wanting to be useful. He looks up at his new mother figure, tragically admitting he was literally born to be a sacrifice. The Duchess gently cups his shoulder, understanding the deep desperation in his eyes and promises to take care of everything. But she leaves him with a heavy thought, asking him to reconsider if the sacrificed souls really want him using this dark power for pure revenge. Later in his room, Leslie hugs his bunny plushie, wondering if the flawless Duchess could actually be wrong. After all, even the best maids sometimes trip over thin air. The next morning at breakfast, Sareen warmly asks if his new son slept well and Leslie happily nods. The giant dad notices Runti and Leslie sitting close together and asks when they became such good friends. Runti smiles, mentioning they completely bonded over their favorite philosopher. Then, he reveals they already hired an etiquette teacher for the boy. Sareen casually remarks that Viscountess Turium is a kind woman. But before he can accidentally say she might be scary, Runti aggressively shoves a whole piece of bread into his dad's mouth. The Duchess catches the panic and smoothly steps in, assuring Leslie she'll handle the teachers. Runti breathes a massive sigh of relief. Tossing a bread roll at her husband, the Duchess adds that Runti will personally tutor Leslie in all the other subjects. Leslie looks genuinely surprised, expecting to be handed off to a bunch of strict strangers. He admits he was secretly terrified of getting another abusive tutor, so he's incredibly relieved. Runti throws an arm around his new little brother, flashing a huge smile and telling him to drop the formal titles since they're family. Sareen and Bethrian watch this sudden wholesome bonding session in complete shock. Sareen literally sheds a tear, feeling totally left out of the brotherly love. Bethrian teases his dad, saying Leslie can start calling him by a nickname later. Sareen instantly snaps and yells at his oldest son. Runti just laughs off the chaos, warmly reminding Leslie that he'll officially be a Salvetter soon. The giant dad leans in, practically begging for his turn at being called a sweet family name. Later, a ridiculously handsome young man walks in, pushing a dessert cart completely stacked with famous sweets. He politely smiles, asking if the spread is to the boy's liking. Leslie is totally overwhelmed by the guy's dazzling aura, completely freezing up and having zero clue how to respond. Internally, the poor kid is stressing out, terrified that one tiny etiquette mistake will turn the Salvetter family into a laughingstock. He knows he needs to speak, but his brain completely short-circuits. The handsome guy immediately catches the vibe and warmly tells him to relax. Slicing up a pristine cake, he smoothly explains that today is strictly about casual greetings, no pressure. He mentions that Runti couldn't stop bragging about Leslie being an absolute prodigy in holy languages. Leslie bashfully waves it off. But the guy insists it's facts, totally blown away that a 12-year-old can translate archaic texts faster than top-tier academy seniors. Conrad casually mentions that he heard Leslie enjoys reading the theories of philosopher Nirokia, prompting the boy to ask if he's a fan too. Conrad confirms he is, explaining that bonding over the obscure philosopher is actually how he and Runti became friends in the first place. He jokes that finding a fellow Nirokia fan is super rare and that Runti completely drops his guard when he meets another reader. Leslie smiles and nods in total agreement. Meanwhile, a quick flashback shows Runti aggressively coughing and denying his fanboy status, pretending he only studies mainstream theories. Back at the table, Conrad brings up another obscure author, Emiria, noting that her books are mostly ignored by nobles just because she's a commoner and a woman. He explains that her writings read more like fairy tales than actual history, making her books incredibly hard to track down. But Leslie confidently states that his new family can obtain absolutely anything because the Salvetters are just that amazing. With sparkles in his eyes, the boy gushes over how kind and remarkable his adoptive family truly is. He excitedly rambles about how Sareen looks like a terrifying monster but is actually a huge softie, and how the stern-looking Bethrian is incredibly gentle. He hypes up Runti's massive brain and calls the Duchess an absolute legend, noting how cool her mask is despite nobles judging her for it. Suddenly, Leslie catches himself rambling and quickly covers his mouth in embarrassment, but Conrad just hits him with a warm smile. Taking a bite of his dessert, the paladin smoothly changes the subject, urging the boy to try the delicious cake. Conrad smiles happily, glad that the sweets are hitting the spot. He admits he was sweating for a second, worried he picked out the wrong flavor since Leslie hadn't touched his plate yet. Hearing Conrad use a formal title, Leslie suddenly realizes the paladin hasn't actually called him by his surname yet. He politely asks Conrad to just drop the formalities and call him Leslie, admitting he absolutely hates his last name. A quick flash of his toxic sister crosses his mind, and he firmly states he never wants to be addressed as a Sperato ever again. Conrad immediately respects his boundaries, giving a polite bow and asking the boy to just call him Conrad in return. Feeling a lot more comfortable, Leslie stands up and bravely asks the paladin for a favor. He nervously asks if they can hold their future classes right here at the Salvetter estate. Conrad looks a bit surprised, admitting he was actually just about to ask if they could move their lessons somewhere else. He drops a sweat drop, awkwardly confessing that he can literally feel someone glaring daggers at the back of his head, revealing Serene violently creeping outside the window. But Conrad smoothly brushes off the overprotective dad's death stare, happily agreeing to keep their lessons at the estate. Later, as Conrad heads downstairs to leave, the head butler asks how his visit went. Conrad cheerfully replies that it was great, and the butler curiously asks about the rumored newly adopted son. The older man asks what young Leslie is actually like in person. Conrad smiles, describing the boy as incredibly joyful and petite, basically the exact opposite of the massive, intimidating Salvetters. He hilariously compares the dynamic to a tiny, pure white bunny being completely surrounded by a pack of dark, ferocious beasts. The butler chuckles warmly, agreeing that the kid sounds like a wonderful person. Conrad's smile softens a bit, noting that despite his bright attitude, the boy clearly carries some heavy baggage. He thinks back to their first brief encounter at the temple, remembering how he found Leslie crying in a noble-only hallway wearing ragged, out-of-season clothes. Snapping back to the present, Conrad asks his own butler to track down some of Amiria's rare books and order him some black tea. He also requests a master list of the best dessert shops in town, totally confusing the butler since Conrad naturally hates sweets. Conrad specifies he wants the absolute sweetest treats they can find, noting how much the boy enjoyed the cake today. Flashing a charming smile, the paladin states that it's simply rude to show up to someone's house without a proper gift. But deep down, Conrad just genuinely wants to get closer to the traumatized boy he once offered a handkerchief to. He mentally reviews their interactions, remembering how shocked Leslie was during their very first meeting. Their second encounter ended with the boy hiding behind Bethrian out of pure embarrassment. But today, Conrad finally got the kid to smile, and he considers that an absolute win. As a flashback shows Leslie happily looking at the dessert cart, Conrad wonders what kind of expression the boy will show him next time. Meanwhile, back at the Salvator estate, the Duchess is doing some serious thinking. She writes a letter, noting that Leslie's dark obsession with revenge could end up completely destroying him. She recalls the sheer desperation and darkness in the 12-year-old's eyes when he spoke about being a human sacrifice. Suddenly, Serene slams his hands on her desk, stubbornly complaining that he still doesn't trust Duke Altera's family, especially since they've been acting super sketchy lately. He demands that Runti stop hanging out with the Altera paladin, but the Duchess calmly tells her husband to back off and let the kids be friends. She suggests framing the friendship as a stealthy investigation to soothe his paranoia. Still, Serene pouts, genuinely worried that the paladin might be dangerous for little Leslie. The Duchess smoothly seals her letter, confidently stating that their new son is nowhere near as fragile as he looks. She hands Serene the freshly stamped envelope, entrusting him with a top-secret delivery to someone who will be the ultimate trump card in the upcoming custody trial. Hitting him with a sweet smile, she praises her husband's reliability, instantly melting the giant warrior's heart. Serene looks at the letter, his protective instincts flaring up. More than anything, he just wants Leslie to have a normal, happy childhood without constantly looking over his shoulder. The massive Duke stands tall, reassuring his wife that they are completely on the same page. They will absolutely crush the Speratos to protect their boy's smile. Serene tracks down the abusive Marquis Sperato, sarcastically panting and mocking the injured noble for refusing to leave his estate. He points out that the Marquis has been dodging his letters and asks how his busted arm is healing. Serene completely ignores the Marquis's grumbling, casually noting that the guy's face looks like a tomato ready to explode. Leaning in with a devious smirk, Serene mentions a little rumor he heard. He loudly gossips about how the Duchess shattered the Marquis's arm and slapped a magical seal on it, making it impossible to heal with divine magic. Flashing a terrifying smile, Serene drops the fake sympathy and relishes in the abuser's suffering. He loudly praises his wife for single-handedly wrecking the entire Sperato Knight squad like it was a walk in the park. The Marquis starts sweating, defensively asking what Serene is trying to imply. Serene just delivers a bone-rattling slap to the man's shoulder, laughing off his hostility. He hilariously taunts the hot-tempered Sperato before turning his back and cheerfully telling him to take care. As Serene walks away, the Marquis glares daggers at him, cursing the Salvator family under his breath. Internally, the toxic father fumes, thinking that a son should obey his parents like gods. He wishes he had just married the brat off to some poor mercenary to starve. Arriving at the royal palace, the Marquis plots to use his next meeting to trigger the absolute downfall of the Salvators. He vows to completely break Leslie and return the boy to his normal, submissive state once he reclaims him. Gripping his cane with pure malice, he promises that if Leslie tries to run away again, there will be hell to pay. The Marquis is escorted into a lush royal garden, approaching Her Majesty, the Queen Dowager. He kisses her hand, turning on the charm and playing the role of a loyal subject recovering from an illness. The Queen Dowager sips her tea, graciously accepting his sweet talk. Cutting to the chase, the Marquis requests to put the barbaric Duchess Salvetor on a noble trial to expose all her alleged crimes. A noble trial is no joke. It requires the Emperor's death sentence of honor and can completely strip a noble of their rank, reducing them to a commoner. Even for an untouchable family like the Salvators, falling from such a high status would be the ultimate public humiliation. The Marquis bows deeply, practically begging Queen Dowager Medea to pull the trigger on the trial. He knows the actual emperor is way too timid to start a war with the Salvators, making the Queen Dowager his only hope. A flashback drops some heavy lore on Medea Shinrucardius. Originally known as Princess Apollonia from a minor kingdom, she was treated as a political pawn. To stop the late emperor from wiping out her homeland, she boldly presented herself to him as a tribute. She secured two massive promises, her crown and her position as the Empress of Rucardius. Throwing away her past, the 20-year-old girl married the 50-year-old emperor, instantly becoming the stepmother to a prince older than herself. But her absolute power run hit a wall when the old emperor suddenly died of an illness, leaving her future up in the air. Back in the present, the Marquis strokes her ego, saying he refuses to watch such a brilliant woman rot in the palace. He offers a shady deal. If she greenlights the trial, he'll guarantee his golden child, Eli, marries Prince Arlendo, securing Medea's power when the prince takes the throne. The Queen Dowager calmly pours some tea, playing the innocent card. She tells the desperate Marquis to stand up, claiming she's simply helping a father save his kidnapped child. But she subtly twists the knife, mentioning she almost canceled Eli's engagement to the prince due to the nasty rumors. The Marquis practically has a heart attack, but she smoothly slides her gloves on and laughs. She brushes it off as a joke, leaving the terrified nobleman completely at her mercy. Later, the Queen Dowager privately reflects on Leslie, pitying the boy for not even receiving a middle name from his toxic parents. She shakes her head, thinking the Marquis is an absolute monster. Smiling with genuine curiosity, she admits she really wants to meet this mysterious child. If the picky, terrifying Duchess Salvetor actually chose to adopt him, the Queen Dowager knows the boy must be incredibly special. Meanwhile, back at the Salvetor estate, Leslie flinches hard, completely expecting his new etiquette teacher to scream at him. But instructor Shula just calls his name in a gentle, soothing tone, asking him to look up. She flashes a warm smile, softly correcting him and saying he absolutely shouldn't be bowing like that. She explains that she is just a simple instructor, while he is the precious young master of the Salvator family. Shula reminds the boy that there are only a handful of nobles in the entire empire who outrank him now, making Leslie gasp in shock. Stepping back, she asks him to closely mirror her movements. She demonstrates a standard, polite bow meant for higher-ranking officials and the elderly, assuring him he won't need to use it often. Leslie asks what to do if he meets the royal family, addressing her formally as Viscountess. She gently asks him to just call her instructor Shula. She then demonstrates a much deeper bow, explaining that royals require the absolute highest level of respect. Leslie mimics the deep bow flawlessly, and Shula claps her hands together, happily praising the bright young boy for nailing it on the first try. Leslie gives a polite bow, thanking instructor Shula for the lesson. The pink-haired instructor totally melts, claiming she'd have pulled an all-nighter preparing if she knew her new student was this adorable. To win him over, she pulls out something precious. She hands Leslie a mysterious blue box containing cotton candy. Leslie opens it up, his eyes sparkling with pure excitement. But being the sheltered kid he is, he hilariously asks if the pink fluff is actually made out of her hair. Shula just laughs, asking how it tastes. Leslie is completely mind-blown, noting that it instantly melted in his mouth. He takes another bite, awkwardly realizing it definitely wasn't made of hair. Leslie blushes, feeling super embarrassed about his silly question. To save face, he quietly mumbles that it looks exactly like a cloud. A quick flashback shows a maid handing him the sweet treat, promising it's delicious. Back in the present, Leslie absolutely loves it, admitting he's never had a snack like this in his entire life. Later, while studying with Runti, Leslie asks his older brother to drop the formal titles and just use his name. Runti raises an eyebrow, pointing out the double standard since Leslie still nervously calls him Sir Runti. Fidgeting with his hands, Leslie explains that he doesn't want the Duchess to feel sad or left out if she's the only one he addresses formally. He sadly recalls the day he choked up and couldn't bring himself to call the Duchess mother despite practicing it a million times. He admits he's just terrified of disappointing her because he respects her way too much. Runti softens, reminding the boy that the Duchess literally saved him from his trashy family, chased off the Marquis, and is fighting to give him the Salvator name. Gently patting Leslie's head, Runti notes that the Duchess already knows how much the boy looks up to her. He assures Leslie that their mother is incredibly understanding and definitely won't take offense if he takes his time. He urges the kid to be a little more selfish since the Duchess really isn't an uptight person. Flashing a warm smile, Runti completely reassures him, promising that absolutely nobody in this house hates him. Leslie smiles back, feeling a massive weight lift off his shoulders and thanks him. Runti smirks, playfully nudging the boy to finally call him Brother Runti. But Leslie still hesitates, worrying that while the Duchess might not mind, he would feel guilty leaving her out. He knows exactly how much it hurts to feel excluded, so he doesn't want to accidentally do that to his new mom. Runti respects that, offering his pinky finger to seal a new promise. Giggling, Leslie links his pinky with Runti's, promising to comfortably call them all by family titles the moment he officially receives the Salvator name. The iconic Salvator crest, a massive shield meant to fend off all enemies, flashes on screen. Suddenly getting serious, Leslie stands up and asks about the looming noble trial, wondering if Saren's absence is tied to it. Runti sighs, confirming the trial hasn't started yet, but the abusive Marquis is pushing hard for a victory. He casually adds that the Duchess is probably holding the Emperor by the neck right about now. Leslie completely freezes, his face turning pale as he takes that literally. He shudders, terrified that his new mom is about to get executed for high treason. Runti quickly bursts into laughter, explaining the wild backstory. Back during a war, the Emperor kept bothering the Duchess while enemies were literally attacking. Completely fed up, the badass Duchess actually reached out and grabbed the Emperor by the throat. Since then, it's just become an inside joke in the family. Runti pats Leslie's head again, praising him for his hard work. He casually mentions he needs to visit the temple soon to arrange Leslie's blessed name. Whenever a noble family has a child, they make a massive donation to the temple to secure a healthy future. In return, the temple officially grants the child a middle name as a divine blessing. That's exactly why middle names are considered sacred in this empire. Cutting to the Duchess, she smiles warmly, hoping her new son receives a beautiful middle name that matches his kind heart. The massive doors of the imperial palace creak open as the Duchess arrives. She confidently strides in, offering a flawless, stoic salute to the Emperor. Emperor Faster Giles Rucardia sighs, looking totally exhausted, and tells her to take a seat, joking about when they became so polite with each other. The Duchess sits down as a maid pours tea, bluntly asking why he summoned her. The Emperor rubs his temples like he's nursing a massive migraine, complaining that both the Prince and the Queen Dowager have been relentlessly pestering him to help the Sperado family. Without missing a beat, the Duchess coldly tells him to just open the nobles' trial exactly like they want. She genuinely doesn't care. The Emperor sweats, warning her that this is incredibly risky since Queen Dowager Medea is likely pulling the strings behind the scenes. He picks up a heavily detailed report, reading off the laundry list of horrific abuse the Marquis inflicted on his youngest son. As the Duchess calmly pours her tea, the Emperor reads the darkest detail. The exact moment the Marquis learned Leslie was terrified of fire, he deliberately set the boy's carriage ablaze. The Emperor reads the Duchess's report in absolute shock. She casually sips her tea, explaining she intentionally left out the wildest part, the human sacrifice. The Emperor loses his mind, wondering how he was supposed to know about this. He is absolutely disgusted that Marquis Sperado would try to burn his own daughter alive. Pinching his chin, he notes that Runti is also digging for evidence on his own. But without solid proof, the Emperor knows the Sperado family will just play the abuse off as strict discipline. He worries they'll use child custody laws against them, but the Duchess isn't having it. She firmly states that Marquis Sperado crossed a massive line the second he treated his daughter like a tool. The Emperor feels guilty that someone exploited the law he created, though the Duchess reminds him he couldn't have predicted this mess. He jokingly asks her to make his life a little easier, but she shoots him down with a smug smirk. Changing the subject, the Emperor asks why she chose to adopt this specific child out of everyone in the Empire. He taps his desk, trying to picture the girl named Leslie. He assumes the Duchess chose her for a highly strategic reason, and guesses it's just because she's cute, totally dumbfounded. The Duchess goes on a rare tangent, praising Leslie for being adorable, smart, and completely sincere. The Emperor is shocked to hear her compliment anyone this much. Sensing an opportunity, he excitedly suggests engaging Leslie to a member of the royal family. The Duchess immediately rejects the offer without missing a beat. She stands up, making it clear her children will choose their own partners, leaving the Emperor hanging. As she prepares to leave, they agree they've discussed everything they need for the upcoming noble trial. Meanwhile, at the Sperado estate, Leslie's biological mother is panicking over the exact same trial. She bites her nails, terrified that losing will turn their family into the laughingstock of the empire. The father sips his tea, stressing that a loss will ruin their chances of making their eldest daughter empress. He knows if they fail, Leslie will officially become a salvator and gain massive political power. Hearing this, the older sister collapses to the floor, absolutely mouthing. She glares with pure jealousy, hating the idea that Leslie could ever stand above her. Suddenly, we see a horrifying flashback of little Leslie begging her family to save her as she is consumed by roaring flames. Back in the present, Leslie grips her dress tightly, trying to keep it together. She sits alone in the library, worried sick because nobody is updating her on the trial's progress. Her eyes well up with guilt, believing this entire stressful situation is her fault. Peeking over a massive desk, she sighs heavily until someone calls her name. Sir Conrad enters the room, bringing a fancy tea set to cheer her up. He pours her a cup as Leslie admits she was tossing and turning all night. The young knight smiles warmly, noticing she's completely stressed out. To sweeten the deal, he slides a delicious-looking eclair across the table. Leslie takes a bite and instantly lights up, the sugar rush melting her worries away. Conrad asks if she's feeling better and she shyly thanks him for checking on her. He gently encourages her to vent her frustrations, saying talking is a great way to let off steam. Leslie blinks, a sudden idea popping into her head. Without hesitating, she leans forward and interrogates him about the noble trials. Conrad is a bit caught off guard by the intense question. Suddenly, Leslie grabs his hands in desperation, begging him to spill the tea. But instead of answering, Conrad gets totally flustered and awkwardly asks her to let go. Leslie quickly pulls her hands back, looking super embarrassed. She apologizes for making him uncomfortable, while Conrad frantically waves it off. Blushing, he explains that as a knight of the Tessentraha Palace, he actually grew up in the temple, strictly separated from girls his entire life. So while he's totally fine talking with her, holding hands is a bit too wild for him right now. Changing the subject, Conrad confidently reminds her that the Duchess is the ultimate, undefeated guardian of the Empire. He smiles warmly, telling Leslie she has absolutely nothing to worry about as long as she believes in her new mother. Leslie clutches her dress tightly, knowing deep down that things are moving behind the scenes without her. Sir Conrad gently reassures her, saying it's completely fine to let out her emotions and just cry. But she stubbornly pouts, proudly declaring that she is a 12-year-old adult. Conrad just chuckles, reminding her that in the Duchess's eyes, she's still just a kid who needs protecting. He admits with a warm smile that the fierce Duchess treats him like a child, too. Comforted by his words, Leslie finally beams, deciding to come clean to her new mom about her nightmares. The knight encourages her to speak honestly the moment the Duchess gets home later that day. Suddenly, Leslie realizes Conrad has been using subtle divine magic to calm her nerves this whole time. He bows respectfully, promising to support her with his entire heart. Since the Duchess is arriving in the dead of night, he begs Leslie to get some sleep, bribing her with the promise of a massive pancake breakfast. Later, Leslie stands nervously in front of the Duchess, clutching her bunny plushie for dear life. Taking a deep breath, she asks for the absolute, unfiltered truth about the upcoming noble trial. The Duchess just smirks like an absolute boss, calling Marquis Sperato a naive fool. She strokes Leslie's hair, assuring her that their master plan is going off without a single hitch. But when she drops the bombshell that Leslie won't even be taking the witness stand, the poor girl is totally shook. Fast forward to the day of the trial, Leslie steps out looking stunning in a high-class, tailored gown. The maids totally hype her up, incredibly proud of their masterpiece. But Leslie feels super awkward, wondering why she needs to flex this hard for such a depressing event. Runti explains that their mother went ahead to grab their father, while their eldest brother is handling the trial's security. As they walk, Leslie has a flashback to when she accidentally spilled tea on the prince. She remembers getting brutally punished by her original family for the tiny mistake. Looking down, she reflects on how crazy it was to ever crave love from those toxic abusers. Runti notices her stiff face and quickly jumps in to calm her nerves. He desperately wants to pat her head, but totally panics and stops so he doesn't ruin her perfect hairstyle. Just then, Bethrian pulls up looking sharp, telling them to head inside while he sweeps the perimeter one last time. Before entering, Runti warns Leslie that the nobles are absolutely going to stare and gossip about her like crazy. He tells her to just ignore the haters, but to memorize the face of anyone who dares to disrespect her. They finally enter the massive trial room, noticing Marquis Sperato hasn't even shown up yet. Runti excuses himself to go check on their secret witness before things kick off. Suddenly, a blonde girl approaches Leslie, pretending not to know her. It's Eli Sperato, her evil older sister, trying to act innocent as she formally introduces herself. But Runti immediately steps between them, calling out her fake act since she already knows exactly who Leslie is. He verbally destroys Eli, reminding her that the Salvators are completely out of her failing family's league. The trial officially begins, and Marquis Sperato immediately starts crying crocodile tears to the emperor. He demands his daughter back, but the Duchess steps up, ready to shut down his entire circus act. Both sides officially swear an oath to tell the truth, while Leslie nervously grips her new mother's hand. The announcer's voice booms across the massive arena, officially commencing the highly anticipated noble trial. The Marquis kicks things off, instantly trying to twist the narrative to his advantage. He claims that while everyone thought the Duchess took Leslie out of pure goodwill, he suddenly yells that she actually kidnapped his frail, sickly child to threaten him. He spins a wild lie, stating the Duchess blackmailed him to steal the Sperato family's dark powers. To back up his insane claim, he dramatically whips out a sealed letter as hard evidence. But the Emperor immediately shoots it down, saying a piece of paper is way too easy to forge. Sweating, the Marquis pockets the fake letter and pivots to his backup plan. He brings up the carriage fire incident, claiming it was all a setup orchestrated by the Duchess. He then calls a terrified, beaten-up servant to the stand to testify. The trembling man lies through his teeth, claiming the Duchess ordered the servants to douse the Sperato carriage in oil. He stutters that he refused the cruel order and was forced to quit right before the fire happened. The Duchess glares at the witness, realizing the Marquis literally tortured this poor guy just to use him as a pawn. Riding his momentum, the Marquis absolutely loses it, pointing furiously and accusing Runti of using dark magic to brainwash his daughter. Unable to take the lies, Leslie jumps out of her seat and screams at the top of her lungs. She points right at Marquis Sperato, exposing him for starving her, locking her in the attic, and never even giving her a blessed name. But instead of believing the victim, the nobles just whisper, wondering how much mind control magic the Salvators used on her. Leslie breaks down in tears, completely devastated that the crowd is buying her father's lies. Her older brother quickly pulls her aside, gently trying to calm her down. The Marquis seizes the moment, claiming her clinging to the Salvators proves she's brainwashed, adding they can chop his hands off if he ever actually abused her. To back up his act, he brings out a projection gem showing a fake happy memory of his wife holding a younger Leslie. He puts on an Oscar-worthy performance, fake crying about how much it breaks his heart to see his daughter turn against him. When the crowd questions why Leslie doesn't have a blessed name if he loved her so much, he immediately throws his own wife under the bus. He boldly claims she had a miscarriage after their first daughter, leaving his wife sweating bullets since she knows he's completely capping. He spins a wild tale that his wife was too depressed to give Leslie a blessed name because the baby was so sickly. His wife quietly panics, remembering how she almost died in labor, yet he begged her for 2 years to have another kid. The Marquis glares at her, silently forcing her to play along with his twisted narrative. He then acts completely offended that anyone would dare question his holy oath to the court. To settle the brainwashing debate, the judge brings in a priest to inspect Leslie. The priest blasts her with a massive wave of divine lightning, making Runti scream her name in panic. The priest confirms there's an awful amount of strong magic inside her body, giving the Marquis the perfect opening to demand justice. But the Emperor quickly shuts him down, reminding him that the Duchess hasn't even spoken yet, so he better watch his mouth. Meanwhile, the Duchess just smirks from the sidelines, looking at the Marquis like he's absolute garbage. Out in the hallway, Leslie huddles on the floor, crying and terrified. Suddenly, Sir Conrad rushes over and grabs her hands, worried sick about her swollen red eyes. She desperately begs him to use his divine power on her to prove Runti didn't cast any strange spell. Conrad activates his aura, letting a warm, tingling energy wash over her. Tears stream down her face as she calls herself utterly useless. She breaks down, feeling like a total failure for not being able to protect the new family she loves. Back inside, the Emperor observes Leslie closely, realizing she's way too small for her age and wondering just how badly they starved her. He slams his gavel and brings the trial back into session. Runti takes the floor, pointing out that carriages are built for rain and wouldn't burn that fast unless soaked in gasoline. The Marquis aggressively calls his claims absurd, trying to flip the script and accuse Runti of using magic to fake it. The Emperor warns Runti to watch his tone, strictly keeping the court in order. Runti respectfully agrees, then steps up to the podium to present his next piece of evidence. He calls Peyton to the stand, the very servant the Marquis tried to throw away. Peyton limps forward, furious that he's currently rotting away in a hospital bed because of his former boss. He absolutely snaps, yelling that he followed every single disgusting order the Marquis gave him, only to be discarded like trash. Without hesitating, Peyton exposes everything, revealing how the Marquis took sick pleasure in starving, whipping, and locking Leslie in the attic. The Marquis sweats nervously, but claims the testimony is weak since it's just coming from a lowly servant. Runti just smiles, announcing he brought some irrefutable evidence to wreck their defense. He holds up a crystal-clear recording gem for the entire court to see. The gem projects a massive hologram showing the exact moment the carriage was sabotaged. Runti fiercely glares at the Marquis, daring him to explain his way out of this one. The Marquis frantically accuses Runti of forging the footage through the magician estate, but Runti completely shuts down that wild theory. He lectures the court, explaining that decent people don't realize how much guys like the Marquis get off on abusing others. He lists off the Marquis's escalating history of abusing animals, servants, and eventually his own flesh and blood. The Marquis laughs it off as a third-rate script demanding more solid proof. Suddenly, Runti introduces a mysterious new witness who looks like a gritty mine worker. The Marquis squints, wondering why this random guy from the West seems so familiar. Slowly, the man takes off his hat to reveal his face. The Marquis and his wife instantly jump out of their seats, looking like they just saw a ghost. The crowd gasps as the man reveals his true identity. He is the third son of the previous head of the Sparado family. The Marquis is sweating bullets as the nobles murmur that his brothers were supposed to be dead. Panicking, he aggressively slaps his wife's hand away when she tries to calm him down. The emperor quietly strokes his chin, sensing this absolute circus of a trial is finally wrapping up. On the stand, the third brother rolls up his sleeves, revealing brutal scars from when the Marquis used to beat him with a horsewhip. He admits he was starved and locked in the attic for days, proving the Marquis inherited his twisted, sadistic nature straight from their father. The jury immediately connects the dots, realizing Leslie's story matches perfectly and neither victim was given a blessed name. Plus, they literally just saw him strike his wife in public. The brother explains how a young lady eventually saved his life, leading him to flee and work in the western coal mines. It was backbreaking labor, but still infinitely better than the total hell he used to call home. Staring daggers at the Marquis, he states he only returned to this traumatic place for one specific reason. He calls out his older brother for being so insanely shameless as to demand a noble trial in the first place. With the room completely turned against the Sparado family, Runti steps up and suggests they wrap this up. He clenches his fist, knowing they absolutely need to officially end the trial today. But the Marquis refuses to tap out. He points to the High Priest's earlier test, desperately clinging to his last trump card. He snarls that if the trial drags on, they'll all be sent home, and he still technically has legal ownership of his useless brat. Runti grits his teeth, realizing the abusive father can still exploit the child protection law to drag Leslie right back to the estate. He questions how the Marquis explains Leslie's painful reaction to the divine magic earlier. The Marquis drops his most pathetic lie yet, claiming his younger brother actually had a genetic disease that made him lash out, and he was sent away for treatment. He claims Leslie showed the same symptoms, so he only disciplined her to cure her. The jury stares at him with absolute disgust. Smug, the Marquis challenges Runti to prove the High Priest's divine test was fake. Runti glances back at his mother, wondering if she's really just going to sit there and let this clown talk. The Duchess casually replies that standing up would only make things worse for the Marquis, who immediately calls her bluff. The Marquis boasts that they'd need another High Priest or a Tessentrehan paladin to legally counter the divine evidence. Just as he thinks he's won, a smooth voice interrupts him from the sidelines. Sir Conrad steps forward. Not only is he the Emperor's nephew, but he's also the youngest Tessentrehan paladin in the Empire. A quick flashback shows Conrad testing his divine power on Leslie earlier, which just felt like a warm, comforting tingle to her. Leslie smiles at him, completely trusting her new friend to save the day. Conrad chuckles softly and tells the panicked Marquis to open his eyes to the truth. He explains that while incredibly rare, some people simply cannot withstand the dense divine power wielded by a high priest. He reveals he literally just read this exact fact in the sacred temple library. Since the Marquis just testified that Leslie has a fragile constitution, Conrad offers to open the restricted library immediately to verify the texts. Checkmate. Conrad politely concludes his statement, leaving the abuser completely speechless. Flashing a holy smile, the young knight prays God shows him mercy. The Marquis starts giggling like a broken toy. He clutches his head in pure panic, realizing he's about to lose everything and pay massive compensation fees. Refusing to accept defeat, he completely loses his mind and screams at the top of his lungs. Like an absolute maniac, he lunges across the room to grab Leslie, screaming that she belongs to him. But before he even gets close, the Duchess drops her hand, blasting him backward like a ragdoll. She steps protectively in front of the terrified girl, declaring to the entire court that Leslie is officially her daughter now. The Duchess glares with killer intent, vowing she will never forgive anyone who dares lay a finger on her child. Leslie buries her face into her new mother's chest, sobbing apologies for causing so much trouble. The Duchess gently pats her back, warmly telling her there's no need to cry anymore. Later in the parlor, Runty tells Leslie it's time to start calling him and the others by their proper titles. He admits they were super bummed when she stopped calling them father and brother and asks her to accept them as her true family. Overjoyed, Leslie wraps her arms around the Duchess and happily shouts, "Yes, mother." Meanwhile, Runty pulls Conrad aside, genuinely asking if some people's bodies are truly too weak for divine power. Conrad's smile drops as he admits it's true, but Leslie definitely isn't one of them. He reveals the high priest intentionally used an obsolete, brutal method that inflicts enough pain to make a normal person pass out or die. Clueless about this dark secret, Leslie cheerfully thanks Conrad for stepping up for her today. When they part ways, Runty watches the young knight leave, completely puzzled. He wonders why a guy who barely knows them went so far out of his way to help them completely wreck the Marquis in court. Glancing down at his adorable new little sister, Runty figures Conrad probably just thinks she's extremely cute. At that exact moment, all the adrenaline leaves Leslie's tiny body, and she wobbles sleepily straight into the Duchess's arms. The Duchess gently nudges Leslie forward as they step into the Grand Temple. A friendly priest warmly welcomes the nervous little girl, completely melting at how adorable she is. With a soft smile, he gently taps her forehead and hits her with a quick divine spell, leaving Leslie totally wide-eyed.